I miss that sexy smile. Looking forward to see you.
Just so everyone knows, we all know that if something goes wrong, it's Tyler's fault, right, Tyler?
Always.
Okay. So people in Super Chat were saying, oh, Tyler wasn't reading my Super Chat, or people were complaining to me. So I addressed it with Tyler. Tyler says you're wrong. You got to just send the hate to Tyler. He says he reads what comes in. So if you want questions answered today from me, we have Kim Iversen here. If you want questions answered from Kim, you got to put them in the Super Chat. And then if Tyler doesn't do his job, well, you're fired, Tyler.
They can tweet me. I don't use Twitter, so feel free. Tweet away.
They can. I think he's on Instagram, and perhaps he does check his messages there as well. I'll just expose you. You know, I will just
You're gonna
expose
dox me?
you. I will dox you. I will dox you if you don't read the Super Chats. Well, welcome, everyone. Happy, what day of the week is it? Is it Friday?
So
I'm
I've been
off
told.
this week because I'm all off because I wasn't here on Wednesday. I went to New York. We have a special guest here. We're going to intro her in a second. I just want to tell everyone that what Adam said on our show, remember when he came on the show and Adam was like, oh, New York's doing great. That was a bunch of bullshit. Adam, I don't know if they blindfolded you and walked you around New York, but I witnessed 2 crimes in 9 hours. I watched just theft, broad daylight, witnessed an assault. It's sinking. People walking around, homeless people walking around completely exposed and naked, so much so that a couple of times I saw a woman and her 2 small children have to try to figure out how to navigate the situation. It's filthy. It's disgusting. It's falling apart. We're going to get to that because Kim is from Los Angeles, which is also at times, in parts, filthy, disgusting, and losing its mind. But we'll get to there. We'll get to all of that. So I'm going to intro our guest. Today we have the lovely Kim Iversen. She is the host of the Kim Iversen Show. That is huge on YouTube. I did not realize how big the show was. I went and looked and I was like, wow, that's pretty good stuff. I watched several clips in preparation for this. Her show is completely independent. It covers politics, culture, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Kim is known for covering a lot on COVID these past couple of years, exposing some of the horrors that we've been talking about on this show. Been tough on Fauci, been tough on mandates, been tough on a lot of the policies that were put out there and put a lot of people in a really bad situation and weren't effective. So she's been serving in, I don't know how she identifies herself as journalist or not, but it reads as journalistic content and doing the hard work that the mainstream media refuses to do. So I agree with her on a lot of that coverage and disagree with her on some other things that we'll get to later in the show. Welcome.
Thanks
to
for
the
having
show.
me. Thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Yes.
Love your set. Love, everything you
Yes.
got going on here. This is so cool compared to mine. Mine's just like a little room and people don't know I'm wearing my pajamas and my slippers.
Pajamas are good. Pajamas are good. And the audience knows here that sometimes in the full shots, I've got some sweatpants going on and I've got my grounding shoes. So we mix it up here. And you're in Los Angeles.
I am, yeah.
So how does it look right now? Let's be honest.
LA is actually fine, believe it or
Okay.
not like New York. I mean, what I'm hearing about New York is insane. And during the pandemic, LA had kind of fallen into a bit of that there was just a far greater number seems of homelessness camps that had popped up everywhere, lining the streets. I mean, where I live in Venice, it was the whole area had just become a homeless encampment, basically.
Did it feel unsafe to you walking around and everything?
Yeah. Well, we didn't, I'm from living in LA, we couldn't walk around much.
Yeah.
we were like told stay in our houses and never leave.
That's true.
Yeah. I mean, it was during the height of the pandemic when we were in lockdown, it was pretty unsafe. So there was a lot of we saw the looting and the destruction of like Santa Monica got burnt down. I mean, it was really bad in a lot of areas and it was unsafe. There were a lot more people, there was a lot more violence. I have an app on my phone that notifies me of all the violence that happens around, Citizen app that notifies me of all the violence that's going on around me. And it definitely higher rates. And it was always something really bizarre, like woman with a machete. And then, and that regularly somebody with a machete. That wasn't even like a one-off. That was an often occurrence.
Wow.
So we're seeing definitely a higher rate of violence. Certainly in the height of the pandemic, it got a lot scarier. And a lot of people around me that never considered owning guns were really seriously discussing buying guns. In fact, they must have because the gun sales went through the roof, even in places like California. So it definitely there's an increase in theft. We're seeing a lot more home robberies when people are home.
Still
burglaries,
to this point?
Yeah, up till now, we're still seeing a higher rate of theft. for sure. And I think probably violence. I haven't looked at the stats, but I would say I do see, just anecdotally in the app, more and more people seem to be getting assaulted when walking, but it doesn't feel that unsafe typically. I mean, we know, don't, take off your jewelry, don't bring your fancy bag or whatever, whatever it is, right? So don't leave anything in your car. People are being more cautious when it comes to that kind of thing.
So I'm curious, somebody like you could go anywhere, right? You have an independent show. You have the dream, right? You built this show up. You can work from anywhere you want.
In the world, yeah.
Anywhere, really anywhere.
As long as I have good internet.
There you go. Why do you stay in LA? What is it about it? Is it really the weather? Because I know the weather is extraordinary, but what is it
great.
really that makes someone like you stay? You're saying like, don't carry your nice bag.
I don't even have a nice bag, by the way, but if I did, I wouldn't carry it right now.
But why live in a place where you couldn't carry a nice bag around, or you'd have to think about that if you have the ability to go wherever you want?
Well, I don't know where that place would be right now. I feel like crime is up everywhere. But specifically why I don't leave, and I get asked this question all the time, is I do love LA. I mean, I love LA. It's great. There are a lot of crazy things about it, but I grew up in Idaho where it was crazy as well in its own way. So I feel like anywhere you live, there's an element of crazy that's just going to be there. I don't, right, whether it be from the right or from the left, like you have to put up with something no matter where you live. But I do love LA. I love the weather. I love the food. I actually really love the people as well. My family's there, so that's another thing. My mom, my grandma, my mom's side of the family are all there. My husband is also, his whole family's there, and he's actually born and raised in the area. So for him, it's like leaving is, that would be a much bigger thing. I've lived all around the country. So
have you ever lived in New York?
I've lived in New York, yeah. I still have my New York number. I'm trying to sell it if anybody wants it.
Nobody wants it anymore. Nobody
People
wants
want
anything.
917 numbers, I think, still,
well, that's
right?
true. For some reason, that is true. People do like the 917.
I'm getting rid of it, though. So, But yeah, I lived in New York. I've lived in Texas. Austin, Texas is where I lived before going to LA. I've lived in Indiana, Illinois, Idaho, Utah.
Yeah, I mean,
Northern California, Southern California.
I love Southern California. Like, I always thought that would be the place that I would go, and I would everyone retires in Florida. I said, not me. I'm going to Malibu. I don't care. And then the pandemic happened. I watched what happened in New York. I watched what happened in California, and I had a baby, and it really changed everything for me because I said, I now need to think about schools. I now need to think about things a little bit differently, these policies, these mandates, what's going to happen. And I just don't trust these very blue cities in particular.
Right. That does make me pretty nervous because we are trying to have a child right now. So that does make me, that definitely frightens me a bit of enrolling a child in a California school district where, the state mandated that even private schools would make the kids get the vaccines, for example. And I'm just a big proponent of medical autonomy. I believe I will make the choice for myself and for my children, with all the information. I want to be given all the information, but I want to make that choice. And, for them to mandate it, even in a private school, so you have no option except to homeschool. And even then, they're making it difficult because then if you want to enroll your child in extracurricular activities, they would then need to be vaccinated, for example. So hopefully they drop that type of thing. But the fact that they were even able to go there during this, I have to think, 18 years of a child's life going through school, what are they going to do in the next 18 years? I don't know. That does make me definitely very nervous. Yeah.
Now, you living in California, we saw what happened with Gavin Newsom. You saw what happened with the lockdowns. At one point, it was like you couldn't eat out. It was very similar. It was a very close parallel to what was happening in New York. And then the mandates and the lockdowns extended beyond the point where it was, the evidence was there that this stuff just wasn't working, and yet they persisted. Was that some of the impetus for you to cover COVID the way you did? The fact that you were in the belly of the beast, right there living amongst it and seeing the crazy that was going on?
No, I actually was covering COVID from the very beginning when everyone in the whole country was in lockdown. So when everyone in the country was going along with it, even red states. So at the very, very beginning, I just knew that wasn't going to work. It was just obvious to me from seeing, because, the United States got the virus later than what had been going on in Europe and in parts, Asia, of course, like Israel, right? All of these areas were getting the virus before we were. And the data was already rolling out by the time it hit us. It was already clear what was going to work and what wasn't going to work. And it was just also, I think, obvious to me, common sense that locking down and hiding away from a virus wasn't going to work. When you open your door, the virus is going to be there. So yeah, you might be able to delay it for a bit of time, but you're ultimately eventually going to have to face the beast. You can't lock down in your panic room forever. So I was covering it actually from the very beginning. I was one of the, I think now looking back, I think it's pretty safe to say I was probably one of the only people in the beginning that was very much against the lockdowns. Amongst all of the other creators that I know or journalists that I know that were covering it.
So you weren't even on board with that initial 3
Never.
weeks. That's fantastic. And I admit to the audience that I was one of those people that got scared. I really did in the beginning. I had this 4.5-month-old. And I saw everything through a different lens. It's almost like I completely lost my common sense. I completely lost everything I knew about health and wellness. And all I could see was this little person. Yeah. And they were scaring me. I wasn't worried for me and I wasn't worried for my husband. I was worried for this little baby. And most of the people that were scaring me were traditional medicine doctors who didn't know and just felt like scaring you. Well, let's scare her and keep her, as worried as possible, just in case. That was the philosophy they followed. And of course, in New York, you saw footage of people in body bags. And I mean, you didn't know the depth of what had happened in terms of the wrong things that were done in hospitals with respect to treatment. You didn't know about, what was happening in nursing homes in New York and why that was so, so many people were dying. You didn't have any information, really. All you had was the fear. So I think there were people that either bought into it or didn't. I think that's fantastic that you didn't. I'm deeply embarrassed to this day that I wiped my packages down and did all of that nonsense initially. But I think it was a moment of real growth and learning for me in terms of what can happen to someone when they give into fear at that point, and how long it can go on. I mean, there's still people that are in that place, unfortunately. It's very, very powerful.
Luckily, I think rare. Now I think it's much more rare that people are in that mindset. There's certainly still people, but even flying out here, I didn't see, there were very few people even at LAX wearing a mask. I mean, it's just not. A few months ago when I was flying around, maybe it was 30%, then it kind of dwindled. And now it was extremely rare to see a person wearing a mask. Most people are maskless at this point. But fear is extremely powerful, and I don't discount that. There's something very scary about a virus. But for me, my stance on it wasn't even just about COVID and the actual science of COVID. I felt a lockdown and imposing that on a population of people was wrong, even if it was the plague.
Yeah.
For me, it's a personal choice.
I agree with you.
You've got to get that information. And I think if it were the plague, most of us would stay inside, including myself. I would make the choice. I'd be like, I'm not going anywhere. And I am wiping down all my packages and I'm doing all of this. But that's my choice. And that to me was, I think the biggest was, there's no way to outrun a virus. I don't even know if we can outrun a plague, for example. It has to kind of, we would like to think we could maybe do something. And I think we should always, I think, try to some degree. But when you rip liberty away from people, I have a big problem with that.
Yeah. Yeah. They lost me on the lockdowns after the 3 weeks because I realized that could just continue and continue.
You at least went 3. Most of them were saying 2 weeks to stop the spread. So you were like, I'll give you 3.
I'll give you 3. And then I was really done. And New York was crazy. I mean, everyone really was just panicked at the time. And I always say, I think if I didn't have a child at that time, I would have been a very different person because that set in. I was still nursing him and I was like, what happens if I get sick? And no one could answer any questions. Right. It was just crazy. I was not in my right head. I always say that. You have to own up.
But wait, were you for lockdowns for others or just for yourself?
I actually wasn't. I wasn't for forcing businesses to have to lock down ever. I was for okay, let's just stay home for a little while. Let's just see what happens here. Let's give it a second. It wasn't about government stepping in and forcing people. It was about let's just all make that decision for ourselves and see what we can do to figure out. It was more like buying time. What is this thing? What is it doing? I did work from home for a really long time. That was a complicated thing because my mom then had back trouble and it was in the midst of COVID and you couldn't go into a hospital with anyone. I was the only one who got COVID, recovered, was fine. So it was just a lot of factors and craziness. We also left the city at some point. But I always talk to people about the fear because I'm somebody who is wired to distrust these institutions, big government, all of it. And even I was like afraid. I was afraid. And I shouldn't have been. I look back now and I say I shouldn't have been. But it's an important lesson for, I think, people who are wired to trust those institutions. Imagine then they already trust them. You layer in a level of fear and now forget it. I mean, they're the people that are still, I still see people in Whole Foods with masks on, voluntarily. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, wow. But what's interesting to me about you is that you're not this hardline conservative by any stretch. And we're going to talk about your politics a little bit toward the end. I'm fascinated by the twists and turns of your career. One of the things that fascinates me is that you had this job at the Hill, and we're going to get into that because your exit from there became pretty controversial. There was a lot of discussion about that. But you started that job at the Hill after you already had your own independent show.
Yeah.
Why? As somebody, like, I look at that, what you're doing is the dream, right? Mm-hmm. People typically go into corporate media and then they leave. And once they're out, they're out.
Right.
Why even entertain that opportunity once you already had a show of your own where you could say whatever you wanted?
Right. Well, it's interesting because I came from corporate media originally as a radio talk show host, working for iHeart, working for Odyssey, all these big radio companies. And then I left corporate media and I went independent. And then, I went back essentially to corporate media working with The Hill, but I was never an employee of The Hill or anything. I was always independent. I was a day by day. I was just paid day to day.
What was your role
no
there?
No contract whatsoever.
What was your title?
Good question.
Okay. So what did you do there? You didn't host the show Rising. You provided.
I was a host. I mean, for sure. I was, for a while I was doing the whole show. And then they stopped me doing the whole show when, honestly, now I'm just going to be honest about it. I don't really speak about it much, but what happened was they wouldn't pay me the same they were paying my co-hosts. And I found out that I was getting paid 40% less than my co-host. And I asked them to pay me equal, even though my numbers were at that point a lot higher than my counterparts. And they, instead of paying me the same amount, cut my hours down. So I then instead started doing they just had me do 2 to 3 segments a day rather than the entire show because they didn't, for whatever reason. And really, I think the reason, I'm just speculating. I don't know the real reason, but I could speculate that the reason was they were always very uncomfortable with me. They weren't quite sold because I was just saying stuff that was, for them, like outlandish. I mean, I was saying the vaccine doesn't stop the spread. To them, that was an outlandish thing to say. I mean, now everybody knows that, right? I mean, even the CDC and Fauci and all of them are admitting to this. But at the time when I was saying it, it was considered, a conspiracy theory. But I was backing it up with data, so they could never really shut me down because their whole entire thing was you just have to be evidence-based. And everything I said was evidence-based. So, I was a host for sure. I was definitely there. I mean, they put me front and center on all of their thumbnails, on all of their imagery.
Probably because you had a big following of your own at that
and their
point.
Consultants told them, the consultants were saying Kim's your main person, so that's the person you put in front of everything. But they still didn't. I still was the lowest paid host.
Did you feel their discomfort? Like, hindsight is everything, right? So you're saying now you speculate that they were uncomfortable, and I'll tell you why. And because I've worked in these places as well. In fact, it's interesting. The Hill came to me twice about an opportunity there, and I declined it both times because I had a feeling about the corporate structure there, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I had that same feeling, by the way, about Fox, and the same feeling about that. But it's like you got to work somewhere, and when you're in that bubble, that's what you're doing. I wasn't doing something independent at that point. But did you feel at that time that your lack of predictability, which that's really what it is, you're unpredictable. Right. Corporate media doesn't like that. It makes them very uncomfortable because they know you're going to say what you want, and they also know that you're not going to be a puppet, right?
And then they don't know what I'm going to say.
They don't know what you're going to say.
Subject, right?
And if you're hired to be, the conservative or the liberal, you're expected to toe this line. Right. And if you step out of that line, you become an instant, like the red flags raised in the building. But did you feel that then?
Yeah, they never really knew how to place me, which is why they never offered me that job. So I was never actually offered the slot. So the hosts that were there were Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty, and he was on the right and she was on the left. And when they left, they were looking to replace the right and the left dynamic. And the reason they never offered me the job, which would have been essentially Crystal's slot, was because they didn't view me as fitting into that left dynamic. They viewed me as this wild card that they couldn't quite place.
Right.
So what they did instead was they tried to build a 3-person show, and they were like, okay, Ryan Grimm on the left, Robbie Suave on the right, and then Kim, the wild card, who's just there. But I was getting the numbers and the views, so they didn't really know what to do with me. But they never offered me that job. They never offered me to a full-time slot on that show. It was discussed all the time. You know, I'd expressed that I'd be willing to move to DC, that I'd be willing to do that job. But they never offered it to me. So, but to go back to your original question, when I was doing my independent show, after I'd left corporate radio, went to do my independent show, and it was going fairly well. During the pandemic, it took a hit for a variety of reasons. One, I took an extremely unpopular opinion at the time. Amongst everybody, my opinion of no lockdowns, no mandates was unpopular with everybody. That's not something that it grew in popularity. Now people look in hindsight and they say, oh no, that was definitely obvious. But at the time, most of those people were absolutely on board with all of that at the time. So I lost a lot of subscribers. People just thought I was killing people, that I was a horrific human being, that was immoral. You know, I'm used to being called these things at this point now. So they believed that my stance was just awful. And I lost a lot of subscribers. I lost a lot of viewership. On top of that, then YouTube started censoring me as well. So they limited my, you know, I released a video on the lab leak theory. They shut that down. That was back in March of 2020. They, in April of 2021, shut me down for reporting on myocarditis with the vaccines, which was not a confirmed, it was just suspicion at the time. Doctors were reporting it. They were linking it to the vaccine, but there was no actual direct link, and I was reporting on that, and they shut me, they hindered my channel for that. So The Hill, I saw they were having rotating hosts, just trying them out, and I just thought it would be fun to guest host, and that's all I asked to do, was to come on and not to try for a job. I really honestly wasn't. I just wanted to see what it was like, how they operated. I was curious about their production, how the producers worked. You know, me being an independent person, I'm working by myself. I'm in a room by myself doing that show alone. So I wanted to see how they were running it. I mean, I know how to run a radio show, but I didn't know how to run what they were doing. So I was just curious, and I asked, hey, can I host? You know, and they said, sure. And then they just every day asked me back. And I was just a day-to-day. So I never signed a contract. There was never a deal like, can you do it for a month? Can you do it for a week? I mean, it was never. It was day-to-day, every day. And it was just, I kept coming back.
So now you say that you weren't told what to say.
Never.
That you would show up there, and what people saw from you while you were there was genuinely you and how you felt about issues.
Yeah, 100%. There was just one time they did cut out one line from one of my radars that they were like, that might be a little bit too, you know.
Was it related to the vaccine topic?
No, it was just something. I made like an analogy, and they were like, that analogy is going to get you in trouble if you say something. You know, if you equate anything to like racism or slavery or the Holocaust, there's like certain analogies that if you make one of those analogies, people freak out and they don't hear.
Okay.
They don't actually hear the substance of what you're saying. They just hear the analogy and they flip. So there was an analogy. I don't even remember what it was, but they were like, maybe not that line. And that was the only time they actually cut a line out of my radars.
So you were essentially producing your own content, delivering your own content. What people saw was you, but you did sense that there was some sense of dis-ease because you weren't being offered a position, right?
Yeah.
That's safe to say. Okay.
Everybody else was given contracts.
Right.
I was the only person that was not offered a contract of any kind. I mean, even others that are offered like 1 month or 2 month contracts at least are given those contracts. I was never. We did eventually negotiate for one, and the day I left, I was to sign it the very next day. And I was actually supposed to sign a contract a couple of weeks prior to that. We did negotiate a deal. They were correcting it. I would have ended up being the highest paid host by a lot with the contracts we were negotiating out and the contracts we had actually completed. So they did get to a point where they were comfortable moving forward. I think with the consultants, also the company shifted, new management came in.
That's right.
They were more comfortable and they were negotiating a much, much more lucrative, bigger deal. We had finished that negotiation and then the Fauci thing happened and I had to walk the day before. I felt forced to walk they knew, I mean, I begged them, do not air it. Don't do it. You will put me in a position I will have no choice.
We're going to get to that in a second. But my suspicion about all this is that they were more uncomfortable with you than you realized.
Yeah.
And here's a moment I want to air. Tyler, can you go to the 154 from her video, Why I'm No Longer on the Hills Rising? I just want, you highlighted this moment, and I want the audience to see it. Do we have sound?
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand. We know now that the vaccine doesn't stop the spread, so I could understand maybe doing a vaccine mandate.
It certainly stops the spread. And
It doesn't stop the spread. We know it doesn't. The science is clear that it's not stopping any spread.
So what you can't see, I mean, I can't see it here. I don't know if the audience can see it at home. That's Alyssa Farah on the right, who was just like horrified that you had said that. Alyssa now, of course, we know is going to go take, at least share that conservative seat at The View, which isn't conservative at all. Alyssa is supposed to be the conservative over there. She and I had a back and forth exchange at one point about mandates. She was very pro-mandate. So essentially she's towing the line. She's pretty much going to agree with them 90% of the time.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to see happen over there. So that moment for me was very indicative, though, because I saw like the pause. And I've been in that position that you're in because I'm a free thinking person as well. We'll get into politics a little bit, but I consider myself a libertarian conservative, but I don't ally myself with politicians. I'm not here to be a cheerleader for a politician. And that becomes a very unpopular position to be in when you work for cable news in particular, because the expectation is, well, if we're on team this, everybody there needs to align with that. So at that point, when you had moments like that happening, did you sense that something might shift at all?
No, at that point, I and you could kind of see in my face, I was genuinely shocked that they
still didn't know.
Right. I really thought everybody knew at that point. I was like, well, of course the vaccine doesn't stop this. But we have all the data now from Israel. Like, this is so obvious. I mean, they're discussing now a booster. I mean, it was just.
I wonder when the date of that was, if it coincides with me.
It was August, like it was actually like August, maybe 4th or 9th or 11th, something like that.
Okay. Well, let me tell you, I went on The View in November, and I don't know if you saw this, but I went on and I was shouted down as misinformation for simply saying that if you get the vaccine, you can still spread COVID.
Yeah.
You can still get it. And
I did a radar on that, actually.
It was right. And it was like as if I had said something crazy. In the meantime, by that point, the CDC had even acknowledged that. So it was absurd that it would be labeled misinformation, but this doesn't surprise me at all. So you do, interviews. I'm sure this happened more than that just one time. That's just the one you highlighted.
Right.
And then suddenly, you, who have been covering Fauci in large detail, you get news that Fauci's going to be coming on the show. And I'm sure you were very excited because this is your opportunity to ask some real questions. So tell me what happens. You get the news on a Sunday night that Fauci's going to be on the show, and how does that play out?
Yeah, it was on a Slack channel, so we Slack a lot of our information, amongst the production staff. And one of them had mentioned, is Fauci confirmed? That's all I saw was like, is Fauci confirmed? And somebody said yes. And then I was like, wait a minute, is Fauci going to be on the show tomorrow? And everything went radio silent. No one said anything on the Slack channel from that point forward. And then a few hours later, I get a phone call from the producers. And they were like, well, so about Fauci. So here's the thing. They asked who was interviewing him.
Of course they did.
Yeah, and then they said, we said Robbie and Bacha. We didn't put your name in. And then they asked again. And we said Robbie and Bacha, and they asked again, and we said Robbie and Bacha. So they're very concerned about who's interviewing Fauci. We've already told them Robbie and Bacha. So, and I was like, no, guys, I mean, it's all or nothing. I mean, just don't do the interview then. If they're not going to have me on there, then don't do the interview. You're going to upset the audience massively. I mean, if you don't have me on that interview, the audience will know. They won't trust you ever again. Like, this will be like CNN. I mean, the audience trust is everything. They will not trust you. So just don't do it then. Go back to his team. Say I'm on it. If they back out, then we do a segment on that instead of the interview with Fauci. We talk about how he backed out, that he was a coward and he wasn't willing to face all of America. He's only going to face the ones that like him, but not the rest. Like so that's what we'll do. And they said, oh, okay, okay. And then I prepared for that interview. And then the next morning, right before I was supposed to go on, they called me again and said, sorry, we're going to have this really uncomfortable conversation, but we've decided that we're not going to go back to the Fauci team and tell them that you're on it, that instead we're just going to go forward with the interview as scheduled. And I just said, you know, the audience will not trust you. And then everything I have told the audience over the last year, that the reason I'm sitting here, the reason I left independent media to come and work on the corporate side was that I was not going to be censored, held back, or limited in any way. And you guys are going to basically crash everything I've been saying for the last year and ruin that. And then how can I come back? Because I've been saying I'm here because I'm not being limited or censored. The minute you do that to me, I can no longer say that. So I can no longer be here. You're putting me in this horrible position. That was 2 hours before the interview. I then, for the next 2 hours, proceeded to message all of them, including the hosts, them, the management. I told everybody, do not, if you do this, you put my future at Rising at risk. Like, don't do it, because how can I stay? I can't. I've been telling the audience that you guys are trustworthy this whole time, and now you do this to me. So they did it anyway. I knew they were recording the interview, and then I begged them, then just don't air it. Okay, fine, you did it. Don't air it. Like, the minute you guys air it, there's no coming back for me. I can't. It would ruin my reputation.
Right.
But they decided to air it anyway. And then I said, then that's it. You guys made the decision. I mean,
we're going to get to that interview in a second, because I watched it, of course. It's a terrible interview, by the way, that they did without her. I'm going to say it because you know how I am. I got to speak the truth. Why do you think they chose not to go back to Fauci and say that you needed to be in the interview?
They didn't want to lose the interview with Fauci, is what my guess would be, is that they thought that having him on would bring the show credibility to some degree. I don't know why they thought that. Everybody on the show criticized Fauci, so it wasn't like I was the mean one. I mean, everybody criticized. I was harder for sure in a lot of ways. Certainly, I'd covered COVID way more than any of the other hosts, so it was for sure my beat more than anybody else's. And
it's interesting to me that they felt that it would bring them, and this is your opinion about obviously how they were feeling, that it would bring them credibility to have Fauci, but somehow wouldn't bring them credibility to have someone on there ask Fauci tough questions, which is really what they should be doing.
Yeah.
Of course, Fauci asked 100 times. You know, Fauci doesn't do interviews with anyone that's going to challenge him. We all know that. So it's unsurprising that he asked who was going to be in the interview, and I think he got exactly what he wanted when I saw the interview. So they did do the interview without you. And I want to just take a look at a moment. Now, this is not to criticize, by the way, the other hosts, who I don't know personally. I do know Robbie took some heat at one point because he was the libertarian and wasn't making very libertarian arguments at some point related to COVID. But I don't know them personally. It's not a dig at them at all, but it is an indication of how that interview went, and it's important. Let's just take a look. 2:58 on that video. Tyler, if you can run that.
Dr. Fauci, thank you so much for joining us. It's actually a huge privilege to be talking to you. Speaking of a moving target, we know so much more now than we did in March of 2020. I'm wondering if you could go back to March of 2020 and start over with the pandemic response. What would you do differently?
Well, if I went back to 2020 and knew what I knew in 2020, I wouldn't do much differently. If I knew in 2020 what I know now, we would do a lot differently.
Now, what's interesting, you can stop that, Tyler. What's interesting is that he goes on to say, actually, that he would impose more restrictions.
Right, yeah.
And that he would, if he, knew now stuff about transmission and whatever, that he would impose more lockdowns and more social distancing.
He'd go full on China.
He'd go full on.
Right.
It wasn't enough, basically, what happened here. Utterly ridiculous. Now, I watched the whole interview, and no disrespect, but it's a...
And I will say, Robbie and Bocce are both wonderful people.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. That's how I said. It's not personal,
Right.
but it is a softball interview.
But they did at least, to give them some credit, they did at least ask him, I think, harder questions than he receives in other interviews.
They asked questions about, they asked like a question about the schools and I believe the masks. But the problem with somebody like Fauci is it's your initial question is not terribly important. It's the follow-up, right? So he gives an answer that makes utterly no sense, and then it's your responsibility to go in and ask, know, something. So I didn't see, it was very clear to me watching that why they didn't want you in the interview, because I'm sure you would have been like, well, that's not what happened. Hold on a second. And he wasn't prepared for that. We all know that.
Right.
So, how did they respond to your exit? Were they at all surprised? Did they try to get you to stay? What happened?
I don't know. I mean, it kind of, there wasn't much communication after they aired the interview. The only thing the producer said to me was, you'll be getting a call from, upper management later today or something at some time today. And then I met with upper management, and they did ask, how can we correct this? Mm-hmm. And I said to them, quite frankly, I said, the only way, first of all, who's the one who decided on this? Who decided? Because that makes a difference. Mm-hmm. Was it upper management? Was it the producing staff? Who was it? They ultimately said it was the producers that made the decision of the show. So the upper management basically said it wasn't us. It was them.
Yeah, I don't believe that for a second. Having worked in these businesses, it just doesn't work like that. Not for a big interview like that. No way.
So then my response was, then the only option left is, one of two options. And that is, we either move forward with my own show that we had been discussing this entire time, since March. We had been discussing them, and in negotiation, we actually finished the negotiation, and then they backed out right before we were supposed to sign that document, where they were giving me my own show that I would be in charge of, that the producers would not have this type of editorial say over me. So, because the problem, when they said to me, no, it was the producers, they made the editorial call. So then my response was, then they can't make any more editorial calls over me. So that's the only way I stay, right? They can no longer be involved with anything I do. So that means either I get my own show entirely that they have nothing to do with, or you fire them, which I knew, they're not going to fire them. It's a corporation. They can't just but that was my, look, I have to be able to, if you want me to be able to come back tomorrow, I've got to be able to say those people no longer work here. The people who made this horrible decision are no longer here. Mm-hmm. They're no longer over me. Mm-hmm. Or you have to give me my own show where I say, again, those people who made that horrible decision are not over me.
And they said no, they just opted out.
Right.
And this is a pattern. The reason that I'm talking about, I'd be curious to know who gives money to The Hill as well. And I read The Hill. I read, online. I have really nothing personal with them either.
Well, now they're owned by Nexstar. So it's whatever Nexstar, that's
interesting.
Huge...
It's really interesting
right.
if there's any. I would be curious to know if there's any big pharma ties there.
It's a big television company, so I would imagine they take advertising dollars.
Somebody didn't want you in that interview,
right.
And this is how it happens. Just to provide people with some context, because I want to talk to you a little bit about the state of corporate media, but this is how it happens. Oftentimes, somebody doesn't just get fired, right? Because that is a problem for them. Now, you weren't under a contract, so it's a little bit different, but.
We were a day away from signing one, so we had finished one, yeah.
Right. Typically what happens, though, is they will minimize you. They will find a way to remove you, to make you uncomfortable. You're now suddenly aware that you can't be yourself on air, right. That now you have to be part of an institution that clearly didn't want you in an interview. You have to somehow, they make you uncomfortable enough where the goal is, let's make them uncomfortable. Oftentimes, I don't know if this was the case for you, to get people to leave.
Right.
Or to get you to toe a line, to get you to say to yourself, okay, it's more important for me to be here and be a puppet than it is to be my own person. So next time I'm just going to sit down, shut up, and maybe then I'll get my own show because I'll be, following protocol. Mm-hmm. This happens all the time. And I've talked about this. I don't know what happened at The View. I was there and interviewed Hillary Clinton, and 3 days later had no job. I can't tell you why, but that's a little odd to me. And it's not only left-wing media. Mm-hmm. I worked at Fox News, and I can tell you that I, at the time, didn't see evidence of a stolen election in terms of voting machines. That was not a popular opinion to have, and things transpired. So, this is a problem, though. So for corporate media, when you look at the state of corporate media today, is that something you would ever go back to? Are you worried about people not really understanding how much of it is not real, is puppeteered, or do you think people's eyes are open now?
I think people's eyes are pretty open at this point, I feel like. But yeah, I definitely would go back to corporate media. The thing that I won't do, and what I didn't do with The Hill, was become reliant on it. Right. So you can go back. I mean, for sure, I have no regrets. I think it was only beneficial for me to be on The Hill. Mm-hmm. Being able to put that message out there for literally millions of people to hear was, that's what I needed to do, wanted to do. And I think that was a good thing overall to have that kind of reach, especially since they didn't limit me. But the minute they did was the minute I could no longer be there. So I of course, would go back to any corporate media under those same under the same parameters.
Can I make a prediction for you?
Sure.
I don't think it's going to happen because they know you too well now. They don't. You are a problem. Hiring people like you is a problem because the most dangerous thing in corporate media is an independent thinker. Very, very dangerous to them because you're not going to appease an advertiser. You're not going to appease a CEO. You're not going to be, if somebody says to you, well, you can ask this and not that, you're going to have a problem with it. If someone says to you, well, we have this big guest and for this one, we're going to sit you out, you're going to know why and you're going to push back as you did.
Right.
So it's going to be very for what corporate media is today, it's going to be really challenging. When I got hired initially by Fox 10 years ago, I sat with Roger Ailes and I said to Roger, I'm very unpredictable. And he said to me, that's why I'm hiring you. That was a different world.
Yeah.
He loved that I would go on and you wouldn't know what I was going to say. Oh, put her in there. You never know. She'll spice it up. She's honest. She's going to... Not appreciated in those spaces as of today. It's very Stefford Wife-ish.
Right, as of today, but I do think that's shifting.
I
think it will
so?
shift, yeah. I think they have to shift if they want to stay in business. I don't think they're going to be able to continue on the way that they are. I mean, look at what happened to CNN Plus. Mm-hmm. They're seeing the writing on the wall. They're going to have to make change, and they're going to have to get uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And that means they're going to have to put uncomfortable people in slots that and that they don't really want to, that they would prefer not to, but they're going to have to if they want to stay in business. So I do think it is shifting, and I think it will. I think there are more entities rising that will essentially replace the current existing ones. I think Fox might be in trouble with the Suns, right? So like as soon as the old guy, Murdoch, I think the Suns might have maybe a different idea with what Fox News should be. So that one might shift more again. But, if you want to, you have to crunch numbers. I mean, at the end of the day, they are operating as a business. And if they want to stay in business, they cannot become another CNN. Even CNN doesn't want to be CNN anymore.
Right.
They're trying to make change.
I think what I'm most concerned about are these like untouchables, these untouchable topics that become a problem. You can't criticize this politician because he's in the White House right now and he's got a bunch of friends in, corporate, so you can't say this. And then you can't talk about anything that's going to make Big Pharma upset. And so what I think is going to happen is that a place like CNN is going to include more conservatives, but they will be conservatives who are very comfortable with being told what to do.
I don't know. I think that
I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I see when somebody like that comes and hires somebody like you after what you've just experienced and being very vocal about the fact that you won't be manipulated, and they hire you, then I'll believe there's a change. Until then, while the View keeps hiring Alyssa Farah, I'm going to be like, yeah. Okay.
Well, but the View's the View, I mean, that one's like off the deep end for sure. That show is, but
and then some.
Yeah. But I do think there is a shift. I think they're nervous about it. It's scary. It's like jumping into a deep end of the pool. Mm-hmm. I don't think they know. They're kind of like, what do we do? I think Fox is way more willing to do it at this point. It seems like with Tucker. I mean, he says
Tucker's different.
He says a lot of outlandish stuff that I'm like, those guys must be just like wringing their hands right now with him. But it's working, and I think they're seeing that. So there's no way to ignore that. There's no way to ignore the Joe Rogans of the world or the Russell Brands of the world, right? Like you just can't ignore that for too long. So I do think that they're being forced to change, but management would have to change. I mean, the whole ethos of the places would have to change.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, is the people at the top still are living in a world where competitors like the Rogans don't exist in their minds. Yeah. They haven't yet absorbed. So we'll see. Yeah. Listen, that would be best case scenario for everyone, for talent, for the public that's consuming this information that's so completely I don't even filtered all the time. People don't realize how filtered it is. I mean, it was making me very uncomfortable. And it's not a left-wing problem. It's a corporate media problem. So we'll see what happens with that. But I'm hopeful that things could change if the right scenario arose. So I wanna leave this. I want to talk about your politics a little bit, because that's also very, very interesting. Most people would assume that you would be this hardline conservative because you were being tough on Fauci, and that's not the case. I actually dug into some of your tweets, So how do you, I don't love labels, but how do you identify yourself politically if you had to? What is that? What are you, a libertarian? Are you a liberal, a classic liberal? Like what is it?
Well, labels are tough, right? Because
Yeah.
they mean something different for everybody. But I'm a liberal. I mean, I view myself as a liberal.
Okay.
I don't think other liberals are liberal anymore. I feel like they've moved away from liberalism. I'm not economically, but it depends because, classic liberals. So I am libertarian when it comes to social issues. So if anything, like you say, you're a libertarian conservative, I would say I'm a libertarian liberal. So
I got you.
Social issues we probably would disagree on.
Maybe.
Right. Well, it depends because the libertarian bent there, when there's the libertarian bent, we often would agree on a lot of the social issues because a lot of times the libertarian bent is hands off. But so it depends on how you're a conservative or how you're a libertarian because there's like four different mixes
Right.
So you've got the conservative, the libertarian conservative that is maybe more libertarian economically, but conservative socially. And then there's the reverse,
Right.
libertarian socially, conservative economically.
Do you have like a politician that I'm just trying to for the audience to put? Is there someone you'd like to see run in the next election? I'm guessing it's not Joe Biden, just because
Joe Biden.
But who would? Is there someone that comes to mind? Is there a political figure that you feel gets it right? Not all the
Right.
time, but most of the time, that would give someone a frame of reference. Is it a Bernie Sanders?
Right.
Is
So
it,
for me, I was a big Bernie and Tulsi Gabbard supporter. So I supported Tulsi was my main pick.
okay.
Bernie was my second pick. I ultimately voted for Bernie during the primary in California because at that point, even though Tulsi was still in the race, I did not feel like she should have been in the race at that point. Unfortunately, even though I was a giant supporter of hers, I felt like she should have exited the race a little bit earlier. So I ended up I did want to see Bernie make it a little further. So I economically have always been a bigger supporter of Bernie. I liked him in 2016, 2020 a little less. I liked him just because I feel like he went more into the social, the morality, social woke type stuff that really turned me off. But I would say, like I watch Tucker and I agree with him like 80% of the time. 20% I don't agree with him.
That's interesting to be a Bernie Sanders supporter and agree with Tucker 80% of the time.
I'm a populist.
That may be, though, the content that Tucker chooses to cover. It may be that
Right.
he's not covering, I don't know where you're particularly liberal, but maybe if it's on issues of, taxation or education, or it may be that those topics are not what he's covering in that moment. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, so there's certain things that, right. So for me, yeah, I'm a libertarian liberal, economically more on the Bernie Sanders side, and socially much more of a libertarian is where I would say.
Okay. So
there's a lot of people I mix with on both sides of the aisle. I'm a populist. I don't know. So right. There's no real person that I could say that's my guy or gal,
Okay. Because for me, I moved to Florida. I'm very, very in line with where Ron DeSantis is right now. I don't know Ron DeSantis personally.
I like Ron DeSantis a lot. I would like to see him run. If he ran, I probably would vote for him.
Okay.
If he ran for president. So depends, of course, who he runs against. But let's say it's Joe Biden and Ron DeSantis. I'm voting for Ron DeSantis.
Interesting.
There are things I don't like. I do think I wish the right would just let go of some of the culture war stuff.
We're going to get to that.
Into. Yeah.
I don't want you to waste that right now because I want them to go harder on the culture war stuff. So that's a great conversation.
I think that's, yeah.
So I want to go first to one important point where we do agree, and that is related to the pandemic. And it's a tweet that I think is very important. If you can pull that up, Tyler, I want to take a look at that. So I never fully agreed with those who said it before, but now I agree there's a glare. Sorry. The United States is a bigoted country, and this, of course, involves that Novak Djokovic was out of the U.S. Open due to his vaccination status. And this is something that's been horrible to watch because I used to refer to this country as the land of the free, and I don't feel that that's appropriate to say anymore. It's horrific what people have allowed to happen here. And I'm curious from your perspective, having covered this pretty intensely for the last 2 years, do you think people's eyes are open in a new and different way to the CDC, to the FDA, to Big Pharma, to the collusion oftentimes between these branches, and to just the idea of what the government will get away with if you allow them to get away with? Are eyes open? Because pandemic 2 is coming around. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
What happens next time around?
Well, it probably won't be the same type of pandemic. Maybe it'll be something a little bit different. Who knows what they'll use to try to get us all to do, to fall in line. But
Bill Gates, if you're watching, give us a clue. Just saying.
Right. Drop it in your next tweet.
Wink, wink, smile.
I do think people are more aware. I think that I think like with any of these issues, people are more aware that there's something bad, there's something corrupt happening, there's something that they want to change. I just think they, again, on this same issue, have gone in the wrong direction of what needs to be changed. Mm-hmm. And that happens with everything. I see this with, the education system and the amount college tuition costs. I see this with big pharma, with corruption in government, anything that has a big money influence in it. My big problem, and this is why I say I think the right should just abandon these culture wars, is that people lose sight of the actual real problem and they just harp on the surface stuff that is not ever going to correct the real issue. The real issue is the fact that big money has influenced these organizations, right? All of these organizations. We talk politics, education system, pharmaceuticals, medicine, science, research, all of that has been infiltrated by big money. So rather than just constantly putting a Band-Aid on things, like even with the student loan forgiveness, that I agree is a Band-Aid problem. That is not getting to the root of the actual issue. So rather than focusing on the root, I think a lot of these, what's gone on is people now say, well, medicine and doctors are corrupt, or they say college sucks, or they throw the baby out with the bathwater, and it's like, actually, what we should be focusing on is the fact that what is pressuring the medical community to fall in line with COVID or whatever the narrative is, what is forcing them to go along? Mm-hmm. And how do we correct the root issue there? How do we get it to where doctors can now be doctors, scientists can be scientists, researchers can be researchers. Mm-hmm. They can give us that information. We can hear all of the different information. We can have a culture of getting when I grew up, I was always get a second opinion. I don't know where that went.
Mm-hmm. Where are the liberals, though? Because the people who really have been rising up that I've seen against big pharma in particular the last 2 years are conservative. Where are all the liberals? You would think if you went back, 20 years, I think about liberals in New York City, they were very willing and very likely to question authority and very likely to question institutions that were out for profit. Are they all asleep suddenly? They just, what happened to liberalism on that issue? Do you know? Do you talk to liberals that?
Oh yeah. I mean,
what do they say?
It's just, this is the thing. And I think this is what happens whenever fear gets involved, whenever anyone's afraid of something happening, their mind just turns off and it just turns into, yeah, but this time it's different. And that's always the response. Yeah, but this time, this issue is different. And when it came to COVID, for example, for them, they thought you're a murderer. Mm-hmm. I mean, they emotionally felt that. You're a murderer. That's the worst thing you could be. You're killing somebody else. Mm-hmm. So if they really believe you're killing somebody else, that you're a murderer, then it's like everything else. When you say, yeah, but what about, big pharma's bought off, they're making all this money, it's billions of dollars, it's the wealthy are running off with all of the money and people are getting poorer and children are not getting educated. And, you can list off all these things and they say, yeah, but murder. Mm-hmm. So it's like
it's an emotional reaction to a fear mongering. You're saying
to just fear in fear is a natural human emotion. We all capitulate to it at some point, and so I think that's so their minds. They say yes, big pharma is a problem. Yes, there's money in politics. Yes, all these things. But this time, this is different. This is murder. So and that's always what it reverts to on every single issue where people are wanting to come and make a stance that is different than the previous stances they were making. It's, yeah, but this time, this is different. This is totally different. This is grandma, or this is children, or this is, it always rolls down to that.
See, for me, it became, when I look at liberals today, to me, they're very comfortable with the end result of that fear, which is that they're very comfortable with control, with government control. They're very comfortable with government institutions having a lot of control. And even though even though they don't like big pharma and they don't like big money in these institutions, when you allied big pharma with big government and you wound up having government now have extreme authority to enforce lockdowns and mask mandates and vax mandates, that created a population that was much more compliant. And I think that aids a big government modern liberal, because in order to put forth any policy that they really want right now, you need a compliant population. So I really think that they were very comfortable with the end game, even if not comfortable with the component of big money and big pharma. That's why I think they laid down and shut up.
Yeah, I mean, I think both sides are big government sides. I think everybody, if you want to rule based on morality, I think no matter what, you're going to end up with government intrusion of some kind. So if it's, definitely obviously the left has always been characterized as the big government party. I actually think, coming from Idaho, both sides are very into government control. It's just they want them to control different things and over different subjects, different topics. So I think that it's the same. I think people are fundamentally the same, liberals and conservatives. For example, woke liberals to me are no different than conservative morality, like Christian conservatives, and woke liberals to me are identical brained. They just have chosen different religion, essentially, of what they want the government to rule by. And
you're talking about abortion and
like anything. So both. Just in general, the actual fundamental what drives that individual is the same thing. They want a world that is going to be built around what they believe is virtuous. And so they want the government to intervene to ensure the world is built in a virtuous and controlled in a way that they believe to be virtuous. They just differ on what's virtue, what the virtues are.
I think that's true for establishment Democrats, establishment Republicans. I don't think that's true for legitimate conservatives, because I certainly don't toe that line.
Yeah.
I don't think I think the big difference between the two is that I don't think a true conservative is going to be comfortable with government exercising major decision making over your life in any respect. Even if they themselves will be pro or anti an issue, they're not going to be comfortable with big government stepping in on that. We can get into some of these issues on abortion and
right, but I think that's like a libertarian. I don't know if that's a conservative. So to me, a conservative is somebody that actually would want government intrusion to control certain, they want the conservative morality to be enforced on people. That seems to be a very conservative perspective. Like if you look at the Bible Belt in the South, like that seems to be what I would consider a conservative, whereas a libertarian is somebody who says, I don't want government intrusion on that.
So you feel that conservatives, say in the Bible Belt, would want their morality enforced upon you?
Yeah.
You do feel that way?
Yeah, I mean they're doing it. I mean they make laws about morality all the time. I mean I grew up in a state like that that was making laws based on I mean in certain places you can't buy liquor on Sundays. In Idaho back in the day when my dad was growing up, you couldn't dance on Sundays. You couldn't buy alcohol on Sundays. There's obviously abortion regulations.
Abortion's the big one.
Right. So there's a lot of a variety of these types of regulations that are that they're guiding based on their individual idea of virtue and morality. And so to me, it's just the conservative has a different set of those virtues than a liberal. They both have them. They're just different on what they want to control for you. Yeah.
It's an interesting perspective, and I think there are definitely way too many people in the population on the left and right that fit into that bracket.
Yeah, that's my big fear. Is I'm just like, well, these people, everybody wants to control you. I moved to California; they want to control. I worry about raising a kid in California and them ripping my parental rights away. Right, like they would say,
it's happening already.
It is happening, and that worries me. It worries me that they say you cannot make medical decisions for your kid. The state decides. The state knows better than you because you're a bad parent if you don't do X, Y, Z for your kid. Like when they say you can't, if I say I don't want my kid to be vaccinated against this or whatever, and they say, well, no, that now we're going to rip your kid away from you, or we're going to take your parental rights away. If they're over the age of 12, they can consent without you. That to me is a problem. But it's also a problem in the reverse, right? If I want to make a decision and the state says, no, you cannot make that decision for your child, Like we're deciding for you what that is.
So let's talk about that, because this gets into issues, and I don't want to. I want to use some of your tweets as a guideline because it's in your own words, and they're very, very interesting. And some of them involve exchanges with other people from the conservative community, from the liberal community. So I want to talk about the word groomers.
I don't even really know what it means. I now know. I think I have a better grasp of what it means now. But it's been.
I can get into that a little bit with you. But let's bring up a tweet. Tyler, Kim has a tweet here on groomers that I think is interesting. Fringe issues that impact 0.5% of the population and the trend of calling people groomers will be the death of the populist right-wing GOP in the same way focusing on racism and calling everyone a Nazi has been for Democrats. So first I want you to explain that, and then I'll give you my take on why I think that that's wrong.
Okay. So what we've seen throughout, really since Donald Trump won the presidency, right, or even while he was running for president, is the left, the people would turn everything into racism. So if you made any sort of criticism, if you said anything at all, and even if it wasn't even remotely racist, it was just suddenly, well, you're a racist. And that is when the Bernie Sanders movement died. So we saw Bernie Sanders rise up as a populist left-wing, and he gained a ton of popularity. In fact, what we saw was a lot of the people that voted for Bernie in 2016 voted for Bernie in the primaries against Hillary Clinton, ended up voting for Donald Trump in the actual general election.
That's right.
So that mentality was these people are focused. What people want to focus on are economic issues. Just keep your eye on the ball. I mean, it's economic. Everybody cares about putting food on their table. They care about being able to go on a family trip once a year to Disneyland or the Grand Canyon or Times Square. They want to be able to they want to be able to have a stay-at-home spouse if they want to raise the kids. They want to be able to have a house with a 2-car garage and take their kids to soccer practice. I mean, these are the things people care about. They want to be able to raise their children the way they want to raise their kids. They want to live in safe communities, right? Like these are the basic things that people want. And Bernie Sanders, when he came around and he's like, we're not doing the things necessary to give people these lives, to build up the middle class. We're destroying the middle class. There's all of things are way out of hand, expensive. The banks are running off with all the money. I mean, he was saying all of these things, and that was absolutely the way people have been feeling, is the economic issues. And the left then, when the movement, basically the head of the movement was cut off when when Hillary Clinton ended up getting that nomination, and the establishment swooped in and made sure that the Bernie Sanders movement was squashed. They called everybody Bernie bros. They said that basically anybody who supported Bernie Sanders was a misogynist, right? So there was a lot of labeling.
Right.
And so the head of the movement got cut off, and then everybody just devolved away from the Bernie Sanders rhetoric and instead into, you're just a racist, you're a misogynist, you're a bigot. And that ultimately ruined the momentum that the populist left had going for it. So had the populist left continued forward with the original Bernie Sanders message, I do think in 2020 he changed his message. He went more woke. That was a giant problem. It didn't work. It turned people off. So had Bernie Sanders stuck with that original 2016 message, had he not gotten into he's a bigot, he's a racist, we don't want sexist, misogynist, bigots running the country, had he just stayed away from that messaging and had he stuck to the actual issues, the kitchen table issues, I don't think that movement would have devolved to the level that it did. And I think Trump also did the same sort of thing in 2020. Had he stuck to his message in 2016, had he really truly stuck to that, I think that his popularity would have grown, but he instead devolved into these culture wars. And I think Ron DeSantis is going down that same path, that it does turn people off. There is absolutely a rabid group of people who absolutely feel very passionately about that. We saw that on the left with racism. There's absolutely a group of people who think that is the end-all be-all, that is the thing that people care about the most, and they run on it, only to find out it's not actually that popular. It might be popular on social media. It might be popular amongst those who are very vocal about it. But ultimately, most people are just living their lives and they're not paying attention to that because it's not actually affecting them.
Oh, go ahead.
So then on the right, so for the left, it was racism. And then it was just average people aren't walking out of their house feeling like they're under attack by racists.
Right.
They're not seeing that. I mean, you could throw a million examples in their faces on social media and in the news, but when they walk out their door, they're not worried they're going to be like, confronted by some racist group. So The right, I think, is doing that same thing, focusing on an issue that the vast majority of people are not confronting in their daily life, is, I think, going to be the death of the GOP populist right wing. I think they're going down the same exact. They're just following the playbook. It's just a different issue.
Okay, so I agree with you in large part with what you said about Sanders. And I'm somebody who talks about pocketbook issues all the time and says if you can't afford to put food on the table, nothing else matters. Right. So I think that should be a priority. Economic issues are always a priority because if you can't afford stuff, if you can't send your kid to school, if you're stressed about money, you can't worry about anything else is the bottom line. Mm-hmm. And also, I think it was a problem for Bernie Sanders because he was calling people racist and bigot when it made no sense. It wasn't justified in large part. These were labels that they were vomiting out at people because they didn't want to engage in serious debate with them. And everyone was turning into a racist. Everyone was turning into a misogynist. Everyone was turning. It was ridiculous. It was utterly ridiculous. And everybody knew that not to be true. The problem here is that when you talk about the groomers, this stuff is real. This stuff is happening. It's happening in classrooms all over the country. It's real for a lot of families. It's not something that's happening to a small fringe group of people that are dealing with a child that has gender dysphoria. That's not how it's happening. It's happening with you send your kids into a school and there's, a drag queen doing storytelling and talking about topics that shouldn't be discussed and there was no parental consent and you didn't sign a form. It's happening all the time. It's happening in school curriculums across the country where they are now forcing kids to absorb, to swallow this heavily politicized cultural content all the time and normalizing things that parents haven't deemed appropriate for their 4 and 5-year-old. It's happening in hospitals around the country where now have doctors putting out videos talking about gender transitions in 3-year-olds and 2-year-olds and how, we bring people in and, we will give drugs to a small child, puberty blockers. And then once they turn 17 or 18, 17 in some cases, then we're going to talk about, surgeries for these kids. And you have a growing number of kids on TikTok, on social media that now feel out of place in one way or another in their own lives. Something's going on. And they say, maybe I'm not a boy. Maybe I'm not a girl. It's the population of people that are identifying now, identifying as a gender other than their biological gender is growing enormously among young kids. Mm-hmm. And they don't know any better. They don't all have gender dysphoria. So it's not just an issue. The grooming is happening everywhere. You can't turn on a cartoon. You cannot turn on a Disney cartoon without being indoctrinated with nonsense. You have to. They have to get to every angle, and they're coming for the kids. And parents know that because they came for the kids with the vaccines. They came for the kids with the masks, and now they're coming for the kids with this woke nonsense. So it's not a fringe issue. It's something that I can promise you. I used to work in schools. I was a dean of a school. This is talked about by parents, and I always talk about the parent vote all day long. They don't want to send their kids to college anymore. They're tired of paying for indoctrination camp. They're homeschooling. You look at the homeschool rates that have popped up around the country. That's not just because of remote learning. That's because of massive indoctrination going on in schools. So the reason I say that this is a powerful issue is because I don't believe that it's a small margin of the country. I believe that it's people waking up to, my kid may not have gender dysphoria. I have a 2.5-year-old. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he walks around and calls himself a monkey. He wants to be curious. I'm not sitting here saying my child has this issue, but I am sitting here saying I'm worried about what school he goes into. We're considering homeschooling. I'm considering where I want to live because I don't want mandates in order. I'm considering, if I put him in a program, do I want him to go in there and be indoctrinated all day long with woke nonsense that then he comes home talking to me about how maybe he's a cat because they said that you can change your gender every day. So this stuff is very real. This cultural stuff for a lot of parents who aren't all right wing is very, very real and very, very different. So I guarantee you there's going to be a parent vote that comes to the polls. And they're going to vote for people like Ron DeSantis because he's talking about this issue.
I don't think it's because of this issue. I don't think that that's the reason why parents are voting against Democrats. I think it's the masking and the mandates and keeping kids out of schools. I think that when you poll
that's important too.
That is exactly what they're actually citing. Now, I do believe that I hear you. I understand that it is a real fear for a lot of parents.
Well, it's just a reality.
Well, but a lot of the people on the left say the same thing about racism in schools. They say that they go to school, they send their kids off to schools, and the history books are filled with white men. They send their kids off to schools, and the only thing they see is powerful white people, and that's the only thing they're learning about, and they're rewriting the history books, and they're teaching them about holidays and lessons, and everything's rooted in racism. They teach them that the United States is this wonderful country, even though it was built on the backs of slavery, and they don't actually talk about slavery much. They make it one day, one segment, and it's not really a full, doesn't give the real scope of the history. I mean, it's the same exact argument.
Well, that's diluted, though.
That's in your perspective.
No, but it is diluted because I taught in schools for many years, and that's not what's happening. So I taught 7 through 12 plus college. That's not. Right. If anything, you walk into schools and you get. It so heavily leans, toward whatever woke cause. I mean, it's absurd. So
can I ask you? Do you
assertions.
think that they're like taking teachers out of Los Angeles and New York and importing them into Kansas? Like, I'm just trying to figure out how this is a nationwide big problem when a big, huge chunk of the country's red, living in red areas with conservative teachers, right? I mean, are they not? Yeah. You're picking teachers from the community. That's where you're getting them. You're not importing them in from New York City, San Francisco, or Los Angeles. Right. That's not what's happening. So,
although some people did leave during the pandemic, move, and now you have, in places like Florida and places like Austin, Texas, and places like you have, Nashville. You have a lot of liberals that have shifted, and they're now in those places. But
they're in those places because they were leaving those liberal areas. A lot of them left because they couldn't stand the liberals anymore. And you know what they do? You know what they do? Then they leave, and then they vote the same way they did in New York, and they tank another city. That happens all the time. Well, hopefully not, but that does happen. But it's a different. A conservative in Idaho, for example, a conservative in California that can't stand California anymore is absolutely a Democrat in Idaho. But an Idaho Democrat is a Republican in California. The politics are different.
You're asking, though, a good question, which is why does somebody living in Montana and their kid goes to school there, why are they worried about these issues? And the reason is because they don't want that garbage seeping into their state, into their city, into their school.
Well, it doesn't sound like it's going to because they're so hyper-vigilant about it. It doesn't sound like they're going to have a problem, right? Because they're saying, I don't want that, and they're all collectively saying it together in unison. So it's not happening.
Today, it's not happening today, but I would invite you to just look back at what happened with healthcare, because I remember having a debate, I don't know how long it was ago, when was Obamacare passed again, about people shouldn't be mandated to have health insurance. And that seemed crazy to me, that you would force somebody to have health insurance, that you would force a young, healthy person to be obligated to have health insurance. And it was wild and it was dystopian. And fast forward to now, and now you've got mandatory vaccination, or a kid can't eat a sandwich in a restaurant in New York. So what people are seeing now is this slippery slope of like, this isn't my problem in my community today, but I don't want it to be tomorrow. And I don't want this becoming a pervasive issue where my country is no longer recognizable in the same way that the country is no longer recognizable as being a beacon of liberty, which you and I both acknowledged at the start of the show. But they don't want it spreading.
Right, but in Idaho, kids were never mandated to be vaccinated. So where I live in Los Angeles, they were. But in Boise, where I'm from, where my whole family lives and where I grew up, they're not. So it's just not, yes, I can understand the fear of this type of education, of kids going to school and maybe there being a drag. I've seen an image of that one time. I don't know how actually prevalent that is.
It's all over New York.
New York or LA or places like that. These are people that choose to live in these cities. That's what they choose for their children. They want their kids to have the exposure. A lot of them, they don't feel like they don't have the same reaction to it as you do. Right. So most of Europe doesn't either. The entire continent of Europe is extremely liberal when it comes to these types of things for kids. Like United States is very Puritan conservative when it comes to issues regarding sex. And
I don't think it's Puritan conservative, though, to oppose, discussions about gender reassignment surgery with small children.
Yeah, sure, I guess it's your own, it's a perspective. I don't know. I don't think, if I taught my kid, for example, about it, I don't think my kid's going to suddenly want it. I don't personally have a problem with my kid learning about everything. And then me being the parent and telling them what.
That's not what's happening, though, Kim.
Well, teaching, why wouldn't it be? I mean, if you're the parent, right? I mean, somebody else isn't parenting your kid.
That's not what's happening, though, because what's happening is these parents are parenting their kids, and then they send them to school for 8 hours a day. And oftentimes they walk into a school and those teachers call them by different pronouns without telling the parents. And they live in a completely alternate fictional reality all day long where they are encouraged to engage in these behaviors and manipulated in large part by content. And then they go home and their parents don't recognize their own children and say, what the heck is going on? You're supposed to be learning reading, writing, and arithmetic, and not doing this. So that's why it's such a deep concern for people. That's why I talk about, I never considered myself a culture warrior or anything. But it's getting too crazy. It's gone too far. And I do see, I do come from New York City, so I do see the extreme on that. And I do want to flock to places like, Montana. But I also see what's happening in places like Texas. And it's just not reliable anymore because the Austins of Texas are polluting it with this craziness when it comes to kids, where kids just can't go to school. Just go to school. Right. It's not an indoctrination camp. It's just supposed to be school. It shouldn't be either way. You shouldn't go there and you don't get, they shouldn't be swallowing conservative ideology all day long either. It should just be school.
No, and I agree with you on that. I mean, I do think we probably should look at curriculum again and refocus it, especially on STEM. I mean, we just have, we're lacking, we're falling behind when it comes to China and India. We need to get our game, get on our game a bit when it comes to education in this country. I totally agree that we probably should reconsider the curriculum. And I agree that ideology should not be taught in schools either way, whether it be a liberal ideology or a conservative ideology. I agree with you that shouldn't be there. So I do think that parents need to have more power when it comes to creating that curriculum. And that really needs to be the discussion. Again, it's a root issue problem. So rather than focusing on this one, which I believe is a fringe issue, I still don't think that, I mean, look, and it's like, how many kids do you know who are transitioning? Can you name one parent of your friends? Do you have any friends or family members who are actually actively transitioning their child? They might have a kid that says, I'm a girl or I'm a boy, and they kind of go along with it for a minute, but they're not, but actively transitioning them.
But even if they're not actively transitioning the child, what's happening is that you're having kids. I mean, we show videos of it all the time here. You have kids going into school and it's like, oh, I'm a boy, I'm a bug, I'm a cat. And the teacher is actually acknowledging this as reality. So it's a complete and utter distortion of reality that's happening. Right. Now, you may not deem that a problem, but it is a problem because if reality ceases to exist, then these kids are very impressionable. These are small children. I mean, and being a parent for me kind of changed this for me a little bit because I get to see, wow, these kids are like sponges. Right. It's not an adult having these conversations who has, a lot of room to kind of analyze, and they're not. They just absorb it.
Sure. I mean, they all think they're like superheroes and they can fly, and that, of course, like kids think a lot of crazy things.
But it's getting a little bit scary for parents, and I think what you may be underestimating, in my view, is how scary it's getting for a lot of parents when they see this content, because they've been living in a reality where they've been sending their kids to college for a long time, and that's an indoctrination camp in and of itself. We're going to talk about college for a second because I'm one of those people that does think that it can be a big waste of time.
I mean, for sure, there in some cases, but I would say that when it comes to, I think we can agree. At least you and I can. I mean, there's plenty of people who won't agree, but I think you and I can agree that probably what needs to happen is a refocus on reality in schools, right? Biology. I mean, I believe, and this is where, with my viewpoints, this is why people can't pinpoint me, because I agree there's two sexes. There's men and women. There's male and female, and that is what needs to be taught in schools, that there are two biological sexes. And yes, there are, of course, sometimes, there are abnormalities that exist when somebody's born with maybe extra chromosomes, and there's of course chromosomal abnormalities and whatnot. But barring all of those, there is two sexes. That needs to be taught in schools. They should not be teaching them that there's 55 different genders. That is getting a bit insane. I mean, if parents want to teach that at home, that is something entirely different, right? And you're not going to be able to control the school playground, what your kids are learning from other children. But what they learn in the classroom should be science-based, and it should be rooted in fact.
Right.
And that if that is not happening in your school, then I do think you should take that up, and there should be more power given to the parents when it comes to the curriculum that is created in their schools. So, I mean, I personally even think, like, look, if you are in a hyper-conservative area that is extremely religious, and you even want and the community agrees that they want a religious class taught in school. I mean, I'm a pretty libertarian on this. I just feel like if that's what the majority wants apparently in that area, and they're living in that conservative, ultra-conservative area, then they should be allowed to have that. Same goes, though, for the liberal side. If there's a community and they say we want to have a gender identity course taught in our school, and the kids are learning about the 55 genders, and that's what the majority of those parents want, power to the parents. I mean, I feel like that needs to be brought back to the parents.
That becomes a choice then about where you want to live and where you want to raise your children, an individual choice. I'm with you on that. The only area I think where we really disagree here is that you believe that it's more of a fringe issue, and I
don't think it's prevalent, right?
It's quite.
I mean, I know a lot of teachers, and they're telling me it's not happening. It's just not in their communities. Like I said, my family's in Idaho. My sister's a school teacher in Idaho. It's just not. I mean, I might hear of reports of the teacher saying, now there's one kid that's saying that they're the opposite gender, and we have to the parents have asked us to recognize that. That certainly, right now we're seeing the rates skyrocket. Skyrocketing is still minimal. It's 1.4%. That is the number today. It was lower than that. It is now raised up to 1.4%, which is like quadruple what it used to be.
It's beyond the transitioning, though. It's beyond I have gender dysphoria. Even if you don't, it's beyond that. It's about polluting the curriculum and polluting.
Right.
It's constantly throwing something in people's faces. It's about the cartoons. It's about the television
shows.
And
I agree with
it's
the
about
cartoon.
media.
Right.
And that's why it's more pervasive. I want to get to, there's another tweet you have on this that's interesting to me. It's about my body, my choice for minors. And I believe you had an exchange with Matt Walsh.
Yes, I did.
That was fascinating on this. People know Matt did that What is a Woman documentary.
He's very invested in this particular subject.
Very, very invested in this issue. And he said, let me introduce you to Dr. Scott Moser, who cuts the breasts off of adolescent girls. Many surgeons across the country will and do inflict top surgery on minors. Moser asserts that he follows very strict guidelines, etc. He puts this up. And then Kim had added a tweet. Do you have Kim's tweet there where she had responded?
Give me 1 second, see if I can find it.
Yeah. You had said something to the effect of my body, my choice. Let's see if you can. That you felt essentially it was a my body, my choice issue for these individuals.
And the parents,
even though they were minors.
Well, the parents and the minors collectively deciding. Right.
Okay, so talk to me a little. Do you have it? Yeah. Oh, yeah, here we go. Where is her tweet? Oh, there it is. Yeah. Okay, so it's their body, their choice. If their parents or anyone is pressuring them, let them live with that and take it up with them later. It's none of our business how others choose to live their lives. First of all, what kind of response did you get to that? I'm sure you took some heat.
I mean, on Twitter, sure. There's definitely, it definitely upset the crowd that is very, that is very invested in this particular subject. But I will, so I mean, definitely a lot of backlash.
So you were saying parental involvement on this. You weren't saying my body, my choice for a minor independently of any sort of parental involvement, just to clarify that first.
Right. I do believe that parents should be involved in the medical decisions of their minors. So I am opposed to liberal areas that are ripping that away from parents, that are saying your 12-year-old, your 13-year-old can make decisions for themselves without your consent. I don't agree with that. So I believe that families should make decisions, medical decisions for families.
I think what Matt was getting at here, and I don't know him personally, so I don't know, but I think that he was getting at the issue of whether it was ethical for a doctor to be performing a life-altering surgery on a minor at all. Should that medical doctor, be permitted to do that? Should they? I mean, doctors lose their licenses because they won't follow a vaccine schedule.
Right.
And here you have doctors doing, top surgery, which is a double mastectomy on minors. that it's disfiguring, and you have to think long term about what this means. If a lot of these individuals change their minds, they detransition, and then what if you decide you want to have a child? You can't breastfeed that child. You lose sensation in your breasts. I mean, this can be a very traumatizing thing. So I think where he was getting at is, A, is this ethical? How are these doctors getting away with this? And B, should we all oppose any rogue physician in his view doing this this type of procedure on a minor? I happen to agree with him that this is, when it comes to minors, this is just too much.
Yeah, I mean, most people agree with you and Matt on this issue. I know that mine is not the popular viewpoint on this, but my viewpoint on it is every individual has an individual reason for doing, he's not saying he does top surgery, by the way, specifically. So if you read what he says, he's not talking about doing top surgery specifically on youth suffering from gender dysphoria. Mm-hmm. So there may be other reasons and other instances where you would medically do a top surgery on an adolescent that is not experiencing gender dysphoria, but, for example, has other things going on, like, there's a variety of medical illness or, abnormalities that happen. Mm-hmm. So, we do know that there are a number of cases of adolescents that are born with both genitalia. You at that point
but
have
take
to
that aside and focus.
But they're
just
not taking
on
it aside. But Matt isn't taking it aside,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of my issue with it.
Okay,
is that you have to take into consideration all. So you can't just say, no, we're going to outright say you're a criminal, outright ban it. This is my problem with even abortion, right? It's the same discussion. You might find it morally reprehensible. You might be disgusted by it, but there are instances where you might say, yeah, but okay, maybe in that case it's fine. And that's what the rest of us are saying, is like, there are these instances where it may be the only choice you have, and in which case it is not I've never met this parent. So it's like, I don't know this parent. I don't know that kid. I don't know what they went through. And so it is not up to me as a stranger who's never met them, or bureaucrats or politicians, to step in and say, I know what's best for you, even though I don't even know you. Mm-hmm. My position on it is, for all medical decisions, and I take this very consistently with medical decisions specifically, people, a lot of the backlash, I received a lot of backlash, but a lot of it to me wasn't sensical backlash. It was emotional backlash that devolved the conversation into other directions.
On this tweet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or just in the whole conversation.
Yeah.
But that's Twitter in general.
Yeah.
So I don't, Twitter to me, I just take it like.
It's not real life.
No, and a lot of times I have fun on Twitter. I just like to, it's just because it's whatever. But, they devolve it into, so you think a parent can do anything they want to their child. No. That's different. So somebody was saying you could put cigarette butts out on your kid, and you think you can molest your kids and sell them off for sex trafficking and child porn. And it's like ridiculous counter arguments that are not actually in this discussion, right? This is about medical decisions specifically. This isn't about what you can and cannot do to your child. This is about medical decisions. This is not libertarianism in general going to the extreme. So in a medical decision, when there is medical consent amongst professionals and the parent, and in some cases, but not all, even the child, because obviously there are many decisions you make for your 2-year-old cannot make their own medical decisions at all, so they cannot even be involved in the decision making. You're making that decision alongside medical professionals. You need to be allowed to do that. That shouldn't be ripped away from you by anybody on the left or the right.
Yeah, so, I think for me it became an issue of when I saw just deeply irresponsible medical professionals that exist. I don't know why a minor would need top surgery for other reasons. I mean, I would have to look into the details of what happened outside the window of gender dysphoria that would require you to do that. But any type of permanent surgery. And then I know some people say, just get breast implants then. No, that's not healthy. I mean, that is not a healthy alternative to say to someone, we're going to chop your breasts off because you decide at 15 that you think you're a different gender and your parents go along with it and it's all fine and dandy, and then you're disfigured and then you will get breast implants 20 years later. That's not a solution. Sorry.
So have you ever met a parent who had a child seriously? So the other thing about this, I think, that is missing in this discussion is it appears to me from the responses and from the further discussion is that people are not fully aware of mental illness. It seems like mental illness is being discounted. People are okay with mastectomy if it's cancer, physical illness, but mental illness seems to still take a back seat as not being real. And it's like they discount it like you could just get therapy for this mental illness, or you don't need a medical intervention for this mental illness. It's not. Mental illness in general just doesn't seem to be taken as seriously as physical illness. So people seem to be okay with it in one instance, as long as it's cancer, physical, then it's okay for a young adolescent to get, if a young adolescent girl develops breast cancer, you'd be fine with a mastectomy at that point. But if she's developed a serious case of gender dysphoria where she's trying to commit suicide on a regular basis, serious.
But the number of kids, the number of people who actually have gender dysphoria is beyond minuscule, right?
Right, very low.
So very, very low.
It's 0.5% in adults.
Right. And even then, I would very heavily caution against a top surgery because of the complications, because of the fact that it's not reversible, and because we know so many people that as adults detransition. And then what do? You try to piece your life back together in some way without a whole body. So I'm somebody that also, by the way, would say, you had brought up in the chain, I was trying to follow the chain of people, but you had brought up like a nose job. You had brought up
which
breast
is also,
implants.
a nose is not like a cosmetic part of your face, right? I mean, that is an actual organ that has a function. And yet young girls are getting nose jobs all the time.
Right. So it is a little bit different.
But how?
Because, if you remove breasts, you completely remove the functionality, right? You remove breasts, you can't breastfeed as an adult. They're gone. It's
But a lot of women don't breastfeed.
A lot of women do breastfeed, actually.
But a lot of women don't.
True. So,
So the real ramification, ultimately,
it's
let's
disfigurement.
Say,
it is disfigurement.
Yes, but so is a nose job. That's my point on bringing that up. Is it is
you can't parallel a nose job to
why not?
Removal of breasts, though. Listen, I say this as somebody who I would not advise a parent to get a kid breast implants, a nose job, or any of those.
Right, either would I.
I would not, wait till you're 18 years old for many reasons.
Even then,
by
I
the
would
way.
tell them not to.
Right, but for many reasons, because with noses, your noses are still growing, and you wind up sometimes with a distortion.
Totally.
With breast, I'm not an advocate for breast implants. I personally don't think that it's healthy. We actually have a guest coming on in a few weeks that are going to talk about autoimmune diseases related to that.
Yeah.
So I'm I'm not interested in all those procedures as a human.
But
That's
do you
not
think
my
that a
perspective.
parent should be prevented from allowing their kid a nose job or breast implants? There are 16, 17-year-old girls that get breast implants.
Well, I think that there's a
jobs.
problem
So should they be prevented?
I think there's a problem with doctors that do those procedures on young people. There's an ethical problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I agree.
There.
I agree in some circumstances. But not all.
I remember a girl in my high school that, she got a nose job in the 8th grade. She was very young. She had numerous issues because her nose did grow. That doctor should not have a job or a license.
Right.
So there are doctors doing things, and we see that, right? If you've learned anything in the last 2 years, you've learned that just because you have a lab coat doesn't mean you're an expert.
Sure.
So I think it's tackling it from two perspectives. It's like there are actual doctors in this industry that are in a money-making enterprise that are not looking out for what's best for people and are making bad decisions. And you also have this new desire to be part of the woke club where there's a rush. It's just take a pause, when you're going to do something like a medical procedure, there needs to be a pause. There's always a risk. There's always a consequence. That's not like, let me put my child into therapy and let's figure this out.
Yeah.
It's a very extreme measure. And it is a disfigurement. So it's deeply concerning to people. I don't know. Well, I do know actually where Matt came to on that, because we have another tweet to follow up, which I think you're going to want to comment on. Let's just loop this in, Tyler, on the cancel culture, because this is where I disagree with them. You say conservative cancel culture. Matt had said apparently Kim Iversen Show thinks children consent to having their body parts chopped off. One wonders what else she thinks children can consent to. Just a repugnant, insane, and morally abominable point of view. Automatically lose credibility on all the top. So this is where he and I disagree, because I believe that I don't agree with what you said, but so what? You said it, you have your own opinion, it's out there. I'm not going to now have to get you fired, or you lose your platform, or, oh, well, if she says this, she must also say X, Y, and Z. And I want to get into that with you a little bit about cancel culture on the right. Because
he even has a segment on his show called Daily Canceled that I was in.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think I heard somebody, one or two people told me that he did a segment on me on his show. I think he did, because I heard it from one or two people, so I'm pretty sure he did. But it's called Daily Canceled. or canceled, or it's canceled something. But yeah, you did a whole segment.
I didn't see that, but I do say to people often, and folks on the right get mad at me as well when I bring this up, that I do believe that cancel culture is something that's very real on the left. It's been, flourishing and alive and well for a very long time, but it also does happen on the right. And I can remember being at Fox, and initially I was very inquisitive about the election and the stolen election, because I was like, I'm not seeing voting machines being tampered with. This is not what I'm hearing from Republican governors. Help me understand what you're seeing. I'm not seeing this being alleged in court by Trump's own representatives. Help me understand, what am I missing? And I cannot tell you the calls for me to be from the audience, fire her, get rid of her. She's lost all credibility. Places that were like, I could never work with her because I wasn't a reliable talking point.
Right.
When in fact, I was really just asking a question. And that scared me, because I became like, wait a minute, is the right turning into what they hate about the left? So do you see it equally prevalent now on both sides in when it comes to cancel culture? And what do you see it different? Like, you've been operating in the YouTube space, you have your own show. Is it different in that space than it is in traditional media, or how does that work?
No, I think it's I think it's exactly the same. Actually, it's funny that to hear your story coming from somebody who's more. Have you always been conservative, like your whole life? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's funny hearing it from your perspective, like, you're experiencing, you're like, oh my gosh, they're turning into the left. Because my experience when the left started doing it was, oh my gosh, they're turning into the right. Because I grew up in a conservative area where, did you grow up in a liberal state or a conservative?
I grew up in New York.
Oh, you did? Okay. So when I grew up in Idaho. So I grew up in a conservative state where it was prevalent completely to cancel people. They if you just morally, I remember being a kid and I wasn't the right religion, and parents wouldn't let their kids play with me. One of my best friends, her mom said, you can't play with her anymore because she's not a Christian girl.
Oh, wow.
So that happened to me all the time growing up. The cancel culture, when they found out that I was raised by Democrats, people would not let their kid play with me, or they would, there was a lot of that going on the conservative side. So growing up in a very conservative area, there was a lot of this moral policing, loads of morality policing. So when, if you came out as gay, for example, you were canceled. You were you'd lose everything. You wouldn't have a life. Gay people had to hide their sexuality. Otherwise, if they came out, that would be the ruin of them. So for me, when the left started doing it, I thought, oh my gosh, they're turning into everything I hated about the right. The things I did not like about conservatism, this is what they're doing. They're just turning into it. So it's funny then when you experience it, you're like, they're turning into the left.
Well, it's so funny because we were kind of living a parallel universe, but in different, like I was living in New York City where if you weren't liberal, you were canceled, where I had friends that would, oh, I can't stand what you're writing on Facebook. I can't have you in my life because you're a conservative, where I was going through the school system and I went to Columbia and I went to these liberal institutions and it was all like one way of thinking or the highway. So it's very interesting to hear your story.
Maybe we're just rebels, right? We just grew up. And
exactly.
We're just rebelling.
I think it's important, though, for people, in the audience, and I don't know, people are watching from all different places, to remember that it is a widespread problem. It's very easy to say it's them.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to say they're the problem. But if it's actually like a cancer on society at large that you have to like root out, then people need to acknowledge it in their own spaces, and as well as in, like, I have to be able to say there's a problem on the right with cancel culture in order to take down the problem on the left with cancel culture. And people don't do that enough.
No, we it's like automatically, it's just like with this trans debate with Matt Walsh. And then, it's like all these people that loved me for my COVID coverage of me saying I'm against mandates. Suddenly, they're like, how dare you when it comes to this? We must tell them that they cannot do this to their kids, and I'm like, and then at the same time, the government is telling you what you must do to your kid. Right. And you're against that. But now you want to tell people what they cannot do for their kid. I'd also be against a mandate if the government said you cannot, you're not allowed, if they just ban, I don't know, it depends on the ban, I guess. But if it's collectively, I don't like it when the government says you can't have something that you do want as well, as long as you have all the information and you're consenting to it. Right. You're an adult. I don't think the government knows better than you. And I don't think your neighbors know better than you either about your life, So, but definitely people, it's a lot of times they're just governing based on their own morality. Again, it's that virtue, their morality. It's not based on just staying a consistent line and saying, if I don't I don't want it done to me, so I'm not going to do it to you, even if I totally think what you're saying is wrong. And like what your point with, Matt, there's definitely, he was basically calling me a horrible person, having this like horrible point of view, and nobody should listen to me for anything anymore.
Yeah.
And I actually, interestingly, so there was a lot of public backlash. What I found really interesting about this exchange, for one, is that it wasn't really that much backlash. It looked like it, but I know backlash. I've been getting it my whole career. I say controversial stuff all the time. This isn't the first time, right? And when I say something really controversial, I'll lose like a ton of subscribers to my YouTube channel, like thousands. I'll suddenly see the number drop. Same with Twitter. I'll see followers number drop. I didn't really experience any loss based on this exchange. That's why I think it's fringe, because when it's something that isn't fringe, they leave me in droves. And even though everybody disagreed with me on this subject on my YouTube channel, when I actually did a segment about this exchange, everybody in the comments was like, oh, Kim, no, you lost me on this one. They didn't leave. And I don't think it's a passionate enough subject, because they will leave me, and I've had it done to me a million times
Maybe it was
over.
because they didn't agree with you, but they also believed you shouldn't have been banned or canceled. So it was more about cancel culture for them too, though, because that's a topic that like I think is very on the minds of everyone right now, because so many TV personalities, so many, I mean, it's like you can't say anything anymore. Musicians, actors, you can't say anything.
Right, yeah, no, I mean, it's absolutely insane. And that's the thing too, like with this debate about the trans issue, the bigger issue for me is the fact that when we hear about the doctors and the clinics and they're just telling parents it's one way and only one way, and this is what you have to do. You have to affirm it and you have to go along with this. And that's like bull. We need second opinions. We need the doctors that are dissenting, the doctors that are saying this is not the only treatment option. Those doctors need to be heard. Those parents need to have that given to them.
That's not the way the medical system works in
but
the United
United States.
And
that to me is what should be criminalized. That part of it should be regulated by the government, where they come in and they say, especially on something so life-changing as getting a top surgery or even a nose job or a boob job, they need to regulate that, for young people. I'm not talking about adults.
You think the government would regulate that?
I think they need to step in and say,
They're never gonna regulate
parents
that.
must be given more resources, more opinions, more information. They need informed consent. I'm a big proponent of
They don't care about
consent,
any of that.
but they need to be.
The government is the institution that's standing in the way of all that. When you have doctors that come out and criticize the vaccine schedule, they go after the government wants them all shut down.
Should end, and that's why culturally,
that's why the government's not the answer, though.
Well,
I know
it
you're
is.
like, who's going to do? Who else is going to do it?
I think it is the government. I think what needs to happen, but I think we collectively all have to get on board with it.
The government who just mandated everybody to get a vaccine.
We should be we are the government. The people should be the government. We should be the government, right? So we should be the ones truly in charge.
It's only our money, Kim. It's not.
I understand, but we've got to change it. And so I think when it comes to this, like the trans issue, for example, right? And the vaccine issue. I just feel like we could have all been on board on this, but now everybody's fighting with each other. The people that were pro-mandate and rather than correcting the system that's causing the problem for both issues, because for both issues it's a lack of informed consent. That's my feeling on it, is that it boils down to parents not being given all of the information, all of the available options before making a life-altering decision. And that needs to be given. So we should have all, to me, rather than Matt Walsh using his platform to scream about this topic over and over, should have been in line with all of us that are saying, let's change the root cause of the problem, which is the lack of informed consent, and then just the pressure that is on these doctors and these clinicians to go one way or else.
Well, they also make a ton of money.
And then there's the money. Of course, there's the money issue.
They get money every time the vaccine schedule. And I know this because my kid got vaccinated for some things, and I did the research. The doctors get money every time that happens, and they get penalized when they don't. But the problem with the government as the solution is the government's in bed with all these things.
I know, but we've got to change that.
The government is just a bunch of bureaucrats. It's not.
But we can't sit back and just say, oh, well, have to change it.
The way that it changes is that people, for example, I went and I found a pediatrician that wasn't going to follow that nonsense, and that was going to say, you know what, I don't care. I'm doing my own thing. The way that it changes is that people make different choices, that people in their communities, they flock to communities where there's not woke ideology. If they don't like it, they leave. They pick up. I said, get out of New York City and let it sink. not by relying on an institution of government that's in bed with Big Pharma. I mean, the FDA, the CDC, they're as corrupt as it comes. That's all government. All this nonsense that happened with the vaccine, that's all government-funded nonsense. You're not going to fix the problem with more government. In fact, you know what? You want to fix the problem? Every industry. You want to fix the problem? Get the government out of it. We can talk about education. Let's go to Tyler.
But let me ask you real quick.
We have two more topics I want to get to
but
before
one question on that. Do you think sports should not have rules? Like, do you watch sports? Do you like watching?
I'm not really into sports.
You
to be
and Robbie.
perfectly
See, Robbie,
honest.
whenever I talk to, I use this with Robbie all the time.
I'm
He's
not
like,
a
I don't watch
sports girl.
sports. The thing is that sports would be no fun if there were no rules.
But it's not about no rules.
I mean,
right?
you have to have some rules. So you have to have some regulation. We can't just say no government. I mean, I have a libertarian bent, but I'm not a libertarian. I mean, I don't think that there should be just eradicate government, live in a state of anarchy.
I'm not saying no government. What I'm saying is never look to the government as the solution, because oftentimes too much of it is the problem.
Too much. But really, it comes down to different. And that's, for me, what we need. It's not about I need more government in the way that government currently exists. I totally agree with everything you said.
A change.
We have
government.
to totally change the way the government, the system with the big money. Yeah.
So you can change it, but I'm also going to shrink it. All right. All right. Let's go to, I have two more topics I want to touch on today. This has been a great conversation. I went way longer than I planned. I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
But I want to let's go first to abortion and mandates. I think that's an interesting conversation. That's the last one, Tyler, the last tweet. And then we're going to go back to loan debt. Okay, so you said you can't be pro-choice and pro-mandate, and you can't be anti-mandate and anti-choice. Prove me wrong. So was this a tweet about pro-choice in terms of abortion? I just want to be clear. All choice.
Well, medical choice. I mean, just to always be
choice.
clear. Like, I always have to, I forget, especially with Twitter. I mean, forget Twitter because you can't, you only get so many
that's why I
characters,
seek clarification before comment.
Yeah, the medical choice.
Okay. So where do you stand on, you said you're pro-choice across the board. So what does that look like for you? Because, so for example, I'm anti-mandate. Mm-hmm. I'm personally pro-life.
Yeah.
I believe the issue should be left to the states. So I'm very comfortable with the issue. I believe the issue of abortion should be a state-by-state issue. And if you don't like the rules in your state, much like I didn't like the mandate rules in New York, I got up and I left and I went to a state where I felt I was more in line with the ideology of the state. That's where I stand on that. And I'm very concerned about federal government coming in and making a decision either way on that issue for many reasons. But do you understand why people viewed the issue of the mandates and abortion differently? Because they're coming in and they're saying that they're protecting another life. Do you understand that lens through which they see it?
Yeah, I actually think it's a consistent argument. I actually think that, so I like it when people are just really consistent with their arguments. Mm-hmm. I hate hypocrisy, right? So I do actually think that the pro-life argument, I see the logic in it, why a person could be anti-mandate, and be very pro-life and want to end abortion. I think it's consistent if and only if the reason why you're anti-mandate is because you believe the vaccines were harmful. You'd have to get to that point in your mind logically. Mm-hmm. If you're just doing it based on choice, then I don't think you could really...
Well, then you'd like me very much. Not going to say anymore.
I don't think you can make that leap totally and then say, oh, it's because I'm for choice. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think the government should be involved in that choice because then... But if you think, well, I'm protecting children from the mandates because I believe that it hurts them. Mm-hmm. And then you say, and I'm protecting children and so therefore I'm pro-life. That to me is a very consistent argument. And even going back to the Matt Walsh debate, if you say, I want to ban it because I'm protecting children, that makes you a consistent person in your argument. I don't agree with it, but I can see the logic in that consistently. So that to me is not a hypocritical. I do think you could be anti-mandate and pro-life. That's not a hypocritical statement. And I say that all the time to people. I try to tell them, that doesn't make you a hypocrite. It is if you go into the reasons. Mm-hmm. So then from my perspective, the reason I was anti-mandate was not because I necessarily believed the vaccines to be harmful. That's totally separate from my reasons for being anti-mandate. It may be one of them, but it's not my core reason. My core reason is I do not believe the government has any place in the decisions that I make over my body or my family, for my child or for myself. I just don't think that the government should be involved in that. That is a personal decision I will make with all of the available information. Same thing for the trans issue. Mm-hmm. Same thing for the abortion issue. Same thing for I believe in the right to end my own life at the end. You know, if I want a physician-assisted suicide, I believe that should be available to me if that's a decision I make.
So I'm curious on the abortion issue. Do you take that all the way to the end of a pregnancy?
I do.
So you believe that?
I'm one of the, and I understand that this is, it's another one of those issues that I am in the minority viewpoint. I understand it is not the most popular viewpoint.
So you would support access to abortion till when?
To the pretty much till the end, if
the
necessary.
moment of delivery.
I mean, I would.
What if somebody delivers the baby? What if somebody delivers the baby and it comes out?
Because wait, you're thinking of it like I support it because I think you just don't want the kid.
No, I'm genuinely curious, truly, just from a medical perspective, like how I'm just trying to get a pinpoint.
I mean, I can't imagine
till the end of a pregnancy. You feel comfortable saying?
I can't imagine a scenario where that wouldn't be needed. But just because I can't imagine it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and so therefore, I don't think I should be getting in the way of the medical professionals and the person involved in that particular situation just because I can't imagine it.
What if somebody just got pregnant and wanted the baby, and then on a whim decided in month 9, 2 weeks before they were going to give birth, I don't want this baby. It's too much stress. I can't do it. They were going through some sort of hormonal, whatever it happens. Believe me, I was pregnant. You're up and down all over the place. And they decide that they're going to have an abortion at that moment.
That to me would be medical malpractice. So
it happens.
I don't think, if it does, I think it's probably extremely rare that a doctor would do that. I think that most doctors do actually adhere to trying to maintain life to the best that they can. I mean, I know that there are definitely some bad doctors out there, and those doctors need to be definitely, their license should be revoked. I think that if a doctor is going to just arbitrarily give a woman an abortion, in that 8th or 9th month or 7th month or even 6th month, 5th month, I mean, for me, really arbitrarily giving an abortion in the 2nd or 3rd trimester, that doctor probably should be under major scrutiny by the medical board.
So then you do have a limit. You're saying
but I don't want the government involved in that limit. So I think that limit should be regulated by the medical professionals themselves, and individuals should just not make that choice. So that should be something that we as a society try to educate individuals away from a choice like that.
So the problem that I have with that is just that it's I had a very different feeling about abortion before I had a baby, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
I was always pro-life, but I didn't really understand the complexities of what happens with a human inside you, because it's impossible to. Like, I just didn't. I remember going for sonograms and having this little tiny person from 2 months old put his hand up, says he didn't like the light, and just be like, "Mom, stop," and be very much a little person.
Right.
And you see when hands form, you see when feet form, you see like cringing at light. And we know that there are a lot of studies that have been done on fetal pain, and they're saying that some studies are showing as early as 12 weeks that a fetus, a baby, whatever you want to call it, I know every term is controversial, feels pain. So I really started to feel a moral obligation to recognize that this is a life. This is a life that's growing inside of another person. And for me, it became really hard to not advocate for that little person in some way who can't advocate for themselves. So I'm someone who is very hesitant to get government involved, and that's why I say leave it to the states. But
that's still government, the state government.
Right. Well, yes. What would be the other option to just
no government involvement on that? So I don't even think the states should be regulating.
Oh, you don't think the state should regulate it at all?
I think the medical
disaster.
Profession should be regulating it themselves.
They won't.
They will. Just like lobotomies. So everybody brings up lobotomies whenever we talk about this type of stuff.
I would not bring up lobotomies.
No,
in
they
comparison.
do. They bring it up and they're like, oh, but lobotomies have been outlawed. No, they haven't. They've never been banned. They were never legally regulated in this country. It was just the medical professional realized this doesn't work. This is terrible. It's unethical. It's immoral. We're not going to do it. So I do think that they will reach that point. I think most doctors would not. So I agree with you. Thinking about fetal pain, that's actually the reason why I believe the government should not be involved in the decision up until at any point, because there are numerous instances where that fetus has developed a debilitating illness that is deadly. They will not survive longer than maybe 12 hours out of the womb. And in the process, from the point that they can develop nervous system, they're in pain. And there's nothing they can do if you cannot. And the mother is told your baby is in constant pain every single day it's developing inside of you.
That's not the the majority of people
And
who
of
get
course
an
not,
abortion.
but the majority of people are not getting an abortion in the second or third trimester. The vast majority are getting it in the first trimester. So we have
But even of the people who are getting an abortion in the second and third trimester, the vast majority of them are not in that position that you just
the vast
described.
majority of them are getting it because of a medical reason, especially in that last trimester.
What would that medical reason be? Because in the last trimester, what you do at that point is you deliver the baby.
If you can, but I know
That's what doctors say when you talk to them, and you say that if there was a problem, you would deliver the baby and put that baby in a baby ICU.
you would try if you can, if your life isn't at risk, right?
So what's really interesting to me though about you, and this is fascinating, is that you really understand at some level the deep corruption of medical institutions, because
Right.
you just covered COVID for 2 years.
Yeah.
So you get that part of it. But for some reason, it's perplexing to me, to be perfectly honest, you don't transition it over to on how an issue like abortion, that could become heavily politicized. And suddenly those doctors are the same doctors who want the vaccine mandated. They're the same doctors who want you to have to leave the hospital and get X, Y, and Z, or you have to sign a consent form that says you don't think your baby should get a hepatitis vaccine at 1 day old. It's the same mindset running everything. So why is it so hard to imagine that they may be compromised in that capacity if they're compromised in so many others?
Well, I guess your fascination with that is the same that I have with you when it comes to you saying that you don't think government's the answer, yet in this you do think government's the answer.
The reason that I believe there has to be some protection is because I believe it's another person entitled to their own set of rights, and someone has to step in to protect them. So I'm not comfortable with a federal ban because I'm a 10th Amendment activist, and I believe, that we have the 10th Amendment for a reason, and I want these states to be able to have their own identities, and I think that's integral to the functioning of the country. But there is a human being that is alive.
Right.
That is, and people say, well, it's not viable. Well, you know what? I delivered my baby and he couldn't take care of himself. Right. If I left him there, he would have died.
Yeah,
right?
That to me is not the
that's
argument.
Just a ridiculous. So I'm fighting for an awareness and some safeguards because I see what's happening in Planned Parenthoods. I've watched way too much footage on what they've done. I see how doctors can get so easily distorted by what's popular and what's trendy and get so disconnected from medical reality and fact and so politicized in so many ways that I'm really concerned about having no protections for a growing, living person living inside another person.
Yeah,
that's really just that. Maybe that's the difference.
Sure. I just don't think that politicians and bureaucrats know what that is. So I don't think that. I think that the medical professionals and the parent know better than and have a connection and the feeling. Unless you think genuinely people, and it's true, there are monsters out there. There are certainly monsters that exist amongst us. But I don't think the majority of these women, I don't think that women carry their babies to term only to want to just suddenly get rid of them. I don't believe that. I think that sure, you could maybe find a case and dig it up, but I think the vast majority of doctors would never perform that abortion.
What about though also, that's a good point, but what about also the carelessness of just how society has become now, where you hear young girls, you see them on TikTok all the time, you see them on social media, and they'll say that they'll talk about abortion like it's a facial, frankly. Like,
right.
Oh, if I get pregnant, I'll just go have an abortion like it's nothing. I mean, that is a problem too. And I understand
Sure.
you're not maybe dealing with fetal pain at that point. If you're, 6 weeks in and you're not dealing with something that looks like a baby and you can be more detached from it. But that's still a very disturbing reality.
Yeah.
Because it is a growing human life. So that's why I say, leave it to the states, and if you don't like I'm not banning it for someone. I'm not telling you can't do it. I also make exceptions for rape,
Unless all the
incest,
states
life
ban
of the
it.
mother. That will never happen.
But what if it? But I mean but you're leaving it that option for the government.
I always believe that there must be caveats for rape, for incest,
Sure.
and for life of the mother. But I don't believe that life of the mother should be so broad that if you have emotional upheaval of some sort, because that happens in pregnancy, you bounce all over the wall.
Right.
There has to be some line of protection there, because my ultimate goal is to protect that mom and that baby.
Sure. And I do believe that is the goal for many in the medical professionals as well. I just don't think that politicians and bureaucrats are the people that should be making those choices. I just don't think they know our individual situations. I don't think that a person should have to run it up the chain to get that red stamp from the
So you
from
don't
the
feel that it's a
bureaucrats.
person. You can't feel that it's a person inside somebody's
No, I
body.
do.
then.
I am saying that. But I'm saying that you as a parent, I believe, have the right to make the medical decisions for your 2-year-old. No different than I think you would have the right to make decisions for the life inside of you that is a child. Certainly, I mean, my viewpoint is the baby.
But you can off that baby.
No, but I think
If you kill that 2-year-old, you've just committed murder and you go to jail. If you
Right.
kill that 9-month-old, you don't go to jail. It's
If
an
you kill-
abortion.
yes.
If you get a doctor in there and they kill that baby, no sweat.
you can give them personhood if you want at a certain time in gestation. I'm not opposed to that. So I think that you're coming at this, I think, from what I think a lot of conservatives tend to, and I understand it's because there are a lot of liberals that are like, whatever, it's not a baby, it's not a person until it's born and breathing air, and I don't agree with that. I actually believe it's a person the minute it can think, which is like it's in the second trimester.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that is an individual person the minute their brain turns on, and I think therefore I'm a believer of that. Consciousness is life. So if you're in a vegetative state later in life and your family pulls a plug, I don't think they've killed you. So
Right. Nor do I.
So I believe in consciousness being life, and I do believe that a fetus does reach consciousness and becomes alive earlier on. But I believe you as the parent can still continue to make the medical decisions for you and your child. And if that means it is best for that child to not continue on to gestation for whatever medical reason, and it shouldn't be something that I have to run by my local politician who just got elected and they've never even done a day of education in their lives, because that happens. There's no requirement. So I don't believe that I should have to go and get the rubber stamp from the politician who has no education in this whatsoever over what myself and every medical doctor I've spoken to believes is the right decision for us.
Well, then you can't believe that it's murder, right? You can't believe
it
that
isn't
it's murder.
if it's in certain cases,
because
I
that's
would say,
the disagreement, right?
Well, no,
If
it
you-
depends on it depends. I don't believe every time you kill a person, it's murder either. I mean, you could kill somebody in self-defense. You could kill somebody.
But this one, right? Say it's not self-defense.
But it could be if your life is in danger. If
Say
your
it's
life
not.
is in danger. But then if it isn't, then you shouldn't have gotten the abortion. And then, that doctor is medical malpractice. And then maybe in that situation, you could be held liable potentially.
That will never happen.
Yeah, but maybe it could. I mean, you could make different laws. If you want to make a law, why don't you make that law? Like, why not that law rather than the other law if it's a law you're making? So if you're going to make a law that says you cannot just arbitrarily, just because you've changed your mind. I just don't think that's the majority of the case anyway. So I don't think that would actually, I don't think that particular. It's just that when
what
you
will
make a
happen
law,
is
though,
there will be loopholes. What will happen is there will be loopholes. Like
there has to be loopholes, though.
Right, but it will be like life of the mother will suddenly be a list of 75 things, like 4 of which actually involve life of the mother, and the rest of which you can just check a box and get your abortion anyway. Like I think the disagreement that happens is that there are people who believe that if you kill a baby in your belly, it is murder from day one till the end. And as a result, murder is not tolerated in society. It's not though.
But
you
in
can't
many
just
cases,
kill
it is.
somebody.
No, you cannot just kill somebody.
But that's what happens.
But
a lot. The
and I
vast
understand,
majority
in
of cases in that first
Right.
trimester are because people just don't want a baby.
In the first trimester, yes.
So it's murder.
Well, if you believe that, right. But I don't believe that. I do not believe that
But
in
do
the
you
first
understand
trimester.
then why those people are saying there's a bunch of people out there that are having an abortion in the first trimester, they're being careless, or they get pregnant, they don't use protection. Now that child gets murdered, and it's our obligation, just as we prevent murder in other cases, like I can't walk up to somebody and shoot them on the street just because.
Right.
We also have to prevent that person from committing murder against that defenseless child at that stage. Hence, this
Yes.
is all bad. That's
I
that's
understand.
where it comes from.
Right, I understand that logic. That is
Mm-hmm.
also not the majority viewpoint, though. I might not have the majority viewpoint of saying I believe that this should just be completely left to the medical
Right.
profession. That every medical decision, I don't think that unless it is your consent has been removed from you, right? So that is where I think the government intervenes, is that if doctors are making a decision for you and you don't get a say, that's mandates, right? So that to me is where the government should intervene to ensure the maximum amount of personal liberty and freedom. That is and that's the only time. So I understand, though, that my viewpoint is not the popular viewpoint, because most people would like to ban it at least in the third trimester. Most people are on board with that, except in the rare cases of mother's
Rape,
life and
incest,
date. Right. Yeah.
I'm just trying to
So-
get you to understand
No, I
why,
understand, but
why that government, why those people suddenly advocate for government, because they view it as murder, and there are rules on the books about murder,
Right.
and there is a lot of arbitrary abortion.
most
That's
people-
ridiculous.
Yeah, but most people agree that the first trimester should be legal. That is actually the majority viewpoint. So the people that take the minority viewpoint of it should be banned from day one because that is a life and now you're committed murder, that's a minority viewpoint. The majority is somewhere in the middle.
I think the majority is now falling, actually, if I had to guess, where they want it stopped after the first trimester. I think that's probably
after
where
like
most
15
people-
weeks, a lot of people, I think it gets kind of split on that second trimester. Some
Yeah.
people are willing to go a bit further.
And I'm very curious how you, like, if you get pregnant, you have a baby, sometimes it changes, sometimes it doesn't. You may be more pro-choice
Yeah.
than you've ever been. For me, it was just a very lived in experience,
Right.
that I never really processed any of it until I like had it going on in my own anatomy. And it's a very bizarre feeling. It's a very strange
Yeah, I mean, and that
sense
might
of
be,
power.
I mean, sure, that very well might be. And I think that's why I take, like, for example, on my other controversial stance on the trans issue, I think unless you've had an immediate family member, your parent, your sibling, or your child go through extreme mental illness, then I also kind of feel the same way. Like, unless you've personally dealt with that, and I have in my life, I have an immediate family member who suffers from extreme mental illness. And I just don't think people understand that it is not just debilitating for that person, but for everybody around them.
Yeah.
That this is, so parents, families will go to an extreme and will exhaust every option available to them before they get to an extreme place. And I just don't think that the government should be involved in that. That is, it's so private, it's so personal, it's so like intimate.
I hear you. I hear you. I think we got this one. Tyler, I want to do one more if you're okay with that. I know we're going long. I just want to get to the loan debt because I think it's an interesting conversation. I think we disagree on this, but it's an important point nonetheless. So this is what I pulled two for you. The first one was, I'm amazed so many seem to want the United States to become an uneducated society reliant on China and India for tech and advancement, while Americans screw their youth, throwing them into the lifelong debt of just trying to stay ahead. That was one. And what was the second one I pulled? I don't remember. If you're in the camp to not forgive student debt because you don't want to pay for others' useless degrees and poor choices, is your solution to encourage high school kids to avoid college? If not, what is your solution? So
Yeah, because that's what I'm hearing.
My solution, so I grew up, didn't have a lot of money, had to work my butt off my entire life, didn't come from a family that had money. My parents, struggled to pay the mortgage, regular middle class family. And I was told, like, you have to work for this. We don't have the money, or you're going to wind up with a giant loan that you have to pay off. So what I did is I worked really, really hard, and I studied, and I wanted those things. And I got a college scholarship, and I worked even harder, and I got a grad school scholarship because there was no way in hell my parents could afford. At the time, it was more than $40,000 a year for 1 year at Columbia. Now God knows what it is. So what I say to people is, if you want that badly, then you have to make it happen. You have to work your ass off. You have to get those scholarships. If you work your ass off and you don't, then you're going to take out a loan and you're going to pay it back.
Right.
End of story. It's really simple for me. I don't believe in forgiving those loans. I really don't believe in forgiving. I know you made another, there was another tweet up there about, I don't know what was it, the loans that were provided to businesses during the pandemic. I think you had related to, I also wouldn't forgive those.
Okay.
Because the government doesn't have any money. It's somebody else's money. So anytime you forgive those kind of loans, you're asking somebody else to forgive a choice that you made. And I don't condone that across the board. So I'm somebody who believes that college is a decision. There's a lot of people now actually getting employed that didn't go to college. A lot of trade schools have popped up. I personally hope my son doesn't go to a school for 4 years and study humanities. I did that. I found a lot of it to be a profound waste of time. I want him to specialize in something. I would love him. He comes out and he's like, I want to be an engineer. That's different. It's very specialized. You come out, you're driven toward a career. There's a lot of direction in that process. But I want him to have accountability and personal responsibility in that process. So that it's really that simple for me.
Yeah, I mean, and I understand that point of view. I think, though, that, and you and I are about the same age, I think. So we went to college at a different era than the kids are going to college today.
Yeah.
And the cost of college has skyrocketed.
That's correct.
And the interest rates have also gone up slightly. So, from 2%, now it's like 4, 5, 6% for college loans. And those loans, ever since 1992, actually, the system changed. So when our parents went to college, if they went to college, it was a different era. And they absolutely could work through summers and pay for their tuition.
Yes.
Like nobody could do that now. You just
No.
cannot. At that age, you're not getting $50,000 in a summer. I mean, you'd be lucky enough to make that in a year, even after you have your college degree, let alone
That's right.
just during the summer. So there's no way a kid is going to be able to work and save up money to pay for college unless their parents are wealthy. They just can't. Even if it's $10,000 or $14,000, you can't work a summer and make that kind of money at that age. So they're then needing to take out these loans because the cost has gone way up. And the loans, since 1992, they've changed where the interest continues to accumulate even while you're in college. So before you've even gotten that degree where you could then go out and actually get a job to actually get a return on that investment, you're already accruing a bunch of interest. So they come out of college and they're way more in debt than they even agreed to be in, really. I mean, yeah, they agreed. Ultimately, they signed on the dotted line, but they're signing against a person who has a finance degree, who's educated, who's told them you can afford this. And that is like what happened with the housing crisis, for example, is that average people who don't understand, they're living different lives. They're educated on different things. They're doing their 9 to 5. And the banker says to them, you can afford this. I've done the math. I've run the numbers. I'm the expert. And I've said you can afford this. And this is the same in the medical professional, right? People go to the expert and the expert says, this is the treatment for you. And you just trust them. You say, okay, I guess then that's what it is because that's your field of expertise.
Yeah.
So these kids are taking out these loans because the experts told them this is what you need to do. And all the adults in the room have told them their entire lives, this is what you need to do. And guess what? It's true. It is what they need to do. It's because the stats are clear. The more education you get, the more money you actually can make in your career. So if you have a high school degree, there are always exceptions to the rules. Many in my family are the exceptions. And you can make, the wealthiest person in my family, for example, barely graduated high school. Okay. So you can certainly make money without, but it's exception. Most people, if you go to college, bachelor's degree, you make more than a person who graduated high school. The stats are there, right? So the more college you get, the more money you can make. So it is in a person's interest to want to go to increase their odds of bettering their earning potential in the future. So I see the merit in going to college, even if it's just for money. But I don't think that's what our society should focus on. I don't think it should be just, you can make more money like my family member who didn't go and makes the most out of everybody. She's a millionaire. Focusing everything on money is not going to build a healthy society where we say we're just going to do what makes us the most money possible. We have to also have a robust, well-rounded society that functions. Like, do you enjoy going to museums? Do you enjoy going to the opera? Do you enjoy concerts and eating? Do you enjoy all of these other things? Do you want to just live a life where you're in the rat race and you make all the money and then you have nowhere to spend it because you just said all of these useless degrees are out there? These people are useless. Like, I don't find the people that are in the arts and humanities useless. I think they actually...
Oh, I don't think they're useless. That's not what I mean by it. What I mean is that college isn't for everyone. That there are a lot of people who go to college because they think they're supposed to, and they get there and they take a bunch of classes that are unrelated, and it does wind up being kind of useless. Sure, they have great experiences, they meet friends, yes, there's more to it, but it doesn't drive them toward the next stage of their development and their life career-wise. They come out like I did. Right. I had a 4.0 in college. I came out and I had no idea what to do with myself.
I think most of us graduate with no idea.
I felt really smart.
Right.
Okay. And you know what? If my parents had paid for that, or if I didn't have loans because I worked my butt off, I got a scholarship, literally gave up my entire high school experience to work to be able to get that scholarship. So I did that and I came out, and if I had paid for it, would it have been worth it? No.
But going back to the scholarship thing, because a lot of people point that out and say, well, then everybody should just get a scholarship. Well, everybody just can't get a scholarship.
No, I'm not saying everybody can't. Right, everybody can't.
But even if you were all...
But you could try.
You can try.
You can work your butt off, and I see a lot of people not doing that and then going to college and expecting somebody else to pay for it. Like, just forgive well, what were you doing in high school? Because I was studying. You went out? Oh, that's too bad. You're going to have to pay off your loan now, honey.
But if everybody took that mentality, so like if we lived in a utopian world suddenly where everybody took that mentality and all the kids, and we see this in a lot of communities, that so all the kids are doing that exact thing. Yeah. They can still only give out so many scholarships. So basically all of you now are graded on a curve, right? So then it becomes only the best of the 4.0s and only the best that got. So
Right.
there is still a limit to that.
It's still a decision, though, right? And so when
But
I
not
look
really.
at people saying, well, it is, though. You can decide not to go to college. You can go join. Now they have these programs out there where you get certifications and you get degrees. It's not like you come out with a high school diploma, end of story.
Right.
You can go and you can do an online program and you can get certified in something. And that person can be making way more money than someone who did what I did. I studied Spanish literature. I came out and I was like, hola. I didn't know what was next. So there are
Right.
options.
Well, mine's in philosophy, so it's not much
There
better.
you go. And listen,
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I'm not saying
here
I
we
didn't
are
enjoy
now.
it.
But
Here we are now having this discussion. And I'm not saying there isn't a benefit, but it is, if we're going to forgive that, do we forgive mortgages? Where does it end where people get to make a decision and it becomes somebody else's problem?
Well, I think when it comes to education, it's not just a decision for yourself, it's a decision for society. And this is kind of my point with China and India, is that other countries are valuing, especially Asian culture, values education a lot, more so than many other cultures. So we are, just from a point of view of national security, putting ourselves in a really tough position if we now take the stance of you don't need college, when all these other countries are saying, yes, you do. And you're going to go and you're going to study and we're going to give it to you for free, by the way, or extremely low cost like they do in China. It's not free in China, but it's close to free. The students don't pay hard. They certainly don't graduate with any debt. They keep the price of college to where they can work the summer job, make the money and pay for their books and tuition and whatnot. So these other countries are, in Europe, it's free. Germany, it's free for everybody. You and I could go to Germany and study for
It's
free.
not free, though. It's not
Well,
free.
the taxpayers are
somebody else pays for it.
investing. The community invests in their future, I believe, by investing in the youth and saying to the youth, we need you to be a strong generation because you got to take care of us when we're old. And we've got to build up a good society that is competitive against other societies. So if we as a society take the stance that it's no longer valuable, when countries like China and Japan and Korea and Vietnam are saying, yes, it is, and they're sending their kids to school, and in India, and they're sending their kids to school, we will be so much more reliant on imports than we've ever been in our lives. I mean, right now, sure, maybe we can make some cell phones here in the United States, but we don't know what the tech is going to be 30 years from now. And who's going to be developing that tech? Because I can tell you right now, with the way things are going, it won't be us. It's going to be India and China making that tech. We're going to have to import that tech if we're going to want ourselves to be a thriving, functional society. Same thing with finance products and products in every realm. I don't think the answer is to take the stance, because we don't have the data on this yet. We don't know what happens if we experiment and tell all of the young kids right now, do something different than college. If you don't go to, fine, no college, do something different. Trade school, we also know the stats on that as it is right now. Trade school is actually a worse investment for kids. So I know.
Well, it's not the same kind of financial investment oftentimes. Like when you can do, like, for example, you can do like certifications in computer programming if that's what you're interested in. It's not the same. Go to school for 4 years. And you also have to, this kind of ties into our first conversation, by the way, because parents are now very frustrated with academia. So they feel like they're spending a ton of money and they're sending their kids to college, and then they send their kids there and it's like a bunch of woke politics and a bunch of all that stuff. It's not even an education anymore.
Right.
So it's not worth it to them across the board.
Yeah,
so
we have a culture.
It's multiple problems
Right.
happening when it comes to education. But
well, in China, they're not sending them off to like dorms, and they're not going to. It's not the same type of education in China and India.
there's a laziness in this country about
Right.
education, right? So the problem is not, oh, we don't have enough kids in college. No, it's what is the quality of that education? What types of decision? What's going on there? Is it just social hour? Because if it's just social hour for 4 years, you can do that differently. You can still get the benefit of evolving as a
Right.
human, and you don't have to spend $40,000+ a year on college. That's if parents are making
Let
those
me ask
financial
you.
decisions.
So you went to Columbia. You went to one of the top schools, right?
I got my graduate degree there. I did my 4-year degree at a college in Staten Island, Wagner College. But yes, I went to Columbia. I got a scholarship. That's why I went.
So, I went to UC Davis in Northern California, which is also a top school.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a lot of studying. The whole notion that I didn't drink a drop when I was in college. I didn't I didn't drink a drop. I went to some parties, but everybody went home because they had to study. It was a lot of studying going on. We were graded on a curve. Everybody that showed up at that school had a 4.0 GPA, and we were all competing against each other. And everybody, and then we're graded on a curve, and kids are getting the first C's in their lives. And they don't even, and then they cry about it for weeks on end, devastated. I mean, a lot of yes, there is the fun aspects that happen at university, but and of course there's always like the little political crowds that crop up and they're really vocal. But even when you watch those episodes that you see, that trend online, and it's a group that is going to go and say, we don't want that speaker here at our university. Those groups are still small because the political activity on college campuses is actually very small compared to just those studying. I mean, the vast majority are just hunkering down and studying. And then people say, oh, well, they're getting degrees, useless degrees in humanities, which, you and I both got. And it's 1 out of 10 that are actually getting degrees in humanities. And then when they say, well, it's gender studies, it's like 16,000 out of 4.5 million college grads annually. 16,000 get a degree in something like gender studies. I think gender studies is actually 2,000 grads in that annually. So this is a tiny, 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 tiny group of people that, the vast majority are actually studying in degrees that are going to improve society. Whether they become teachers that we will need, we have more kids, we need more teachers, whether they become engineers, scientists, business, like whatever it might be, these people are getting degrees to benefit society. So when they then come out of it riddled in debt, what's gone on now is it is discouraging the next group, because the next group is looking and saying, I don't want that, so I'm not going to go. And then they say, I can make more money without that. But it's not about just the money. We need these thinkers. We need the scientists. We need these people that are bettering society to ensure we remain competitive in the minimum. I mean, I would like to also live in a nice society. But in the minimum, if it's just about making sure we're not reliant on China, I mean, I think every conservative in this country should be screaming for every kid to go and become an engineer or a doctor or a scientist, because we are far behind China and India, and it's only going to get worse.
But if there's a kid that goes to college and is very hyper aware of the fact that they have a loan that they're going to have to pay back, that child is going to be more inclined, and I say child because, they come right out of high school.
Right.
That kid is going to try like heck to make the most of that experience. It's their dollar that it's on, right? So I work really hard. I get a scholarship. I know if I lose that scholarship, I'm paying for it. I better hunk it down. I'm going to study. I'm not going out to parties all the time. What is the message you send if then you have a whole population of college kids that you're like, don't worry about it. This is free. This is free.
Well, I mean, 10,000.
Does it change the attitude?
I mean, come on, though. 10,000 is not free. I mean, the rest, we all have loans greater than 10 grand.
Well, you were talking about a free education in some of these countries.
Well, I think that we should be giving. So for one, I don't think anybody should have debt when it comes to their undergrad, especially in a public school. So if you're going to go to a state school like UC Davis, if you can get into that school, it should be free. If you can get any.
Nothing is free, though.
Well, it should be taxpayer funded. We as taxpayers should value the education enough. We can put controls on it. We can make sure it's merit based and ensure that it is.
But what if you're looking at the educational? What if you're somebody who looks at the educational system and you say, I don't like what's going on here. I don't want my money to go to this anymore. I'm tired. It's not kids aren't coming out smarter. They're coming out dumber. They can't think for themselves. They come out like a robot. They are all woke. They go in with common sense and they come out like I don't know, a leftist professor.
Right.
What if that's your feeling about it and you say, I don't want my money. I work hard. I don't want my money going to that. If you're all about freedom.
Sure. No, I mean, okay. I mean, I'm not economically. I'm economically on the left.
Okay. But do you see how somebody might say, why?
I understand. I totally understand the argument. I just also believe that, and we can try that experiment. We can go back to that where a lot of the kids don't go to college. We will have to become a manufacturing country again. That's what we'll need to be. So we can do this if that's what people want to do. But we're going to have to go back to manufacturing. And that means we're going to be behind. And other countries are going to be developed. And we're going to have to go back into a manufacturing space. Because if we don't have the mines, we're going to have to import them in from China and India.
Or we can just tell young people, it's on you. Listen, you want to go to college? It can be a great experience. You want to study whatever? Great. I support you. Maybe some families can afford to spend the money. If you can't, listen, work hard. Try to get a scholarship. If you can't, we'll get you a loan. You're going to have to pay that back. Sure. And that's the philosophy they go into life with, and they have to make a decision if it's worth it to them or not.
But that's becoming discouraging because the amount of loans are so significant.
Life is discouraging. Life is hard.
But again, I get that. But again, if you have that, you got to then own it. And when you're old and all these kids can only manufacture and they're going to be the ones doing the seamstress stuff for China now, and it reverses, you got to own it. So if that's the society you want to live in, fine. But we have to understand what we're building. And if that's what we're going to choose to build, we've got to own that. So we have to say, are we going to be a society of engineers? Are we going to be a society of people that are making the new technology?
Engineers make a lot of money. They're
They
perfectly
do.
capable of going to college and taking out a loan and paying that back. When
And they
start a
do.
job.
I mean, we're not talking about forgiving grad school loans, right? These are undergraduate loans for the basic level. If you want to be an engineer really, truly, you need to get a master's degree. I mean, you can't just get your bachelor's and then go. You need to do more education. And there's
Here's my
certainly,
message is, because I know we're going to have to close out. We're going on. Well, we've been talking for 2.5.
We could just go on forever, right.
My message is nothing is free.
Right. No,
Nothing
I
in
get it.
life is free.
Right.
You're going to get out of college and nothing. You know what? You're not going to get free lunch. You're
Right.
not going to get free dinner. Start the lesson early. It can be infinitely more rewarding if you have to pay that money back. I mean, doctors do it all the time. They take out
Right,
loans. They
but-
go to medical school. They come out and they pay them off. They
No,
work
not
their
very
asses
easily.
off.
I could tell you, you don't even want to know the amount of debt my family is in. I mean,
No, I know it's not
a
easy.
massive, and it's not easy, and it is debilitating the youth. I mean, they're not able to move on with their lives in the same way that the previous generation was able to. It is problematic. But I will say, I mean, look, there can be a happy medium here, and that can be we as a society can value education and say we are going to tax fund education. We could put more controls on it on what is tax funded degrees. You could say, okay, fine, no gender studies degrees are tax funded. I'm fine. If you want to go down that road, like we can parse it out and say these are the ones that we've just, I do have a bit of a problem with it because I say society at large, for example, will say some degrees are just totally not valuable and they won't allow art degrees or music degrees. And I do actually think there is value to that because you want to enjoy your life with that. You want to enjoy the money you've made.
Well,
But
and
I
also
think-
those people enrich everybody else's life.
Sure. So I
there's-
do think that. So it becomes kind of a slippery slope
That's
if we say this one's not valuable. But so let's just say we agree that all education, all public school, lower education, bachelor's degrees are publicly funded. But what isn't publicly funded, and it isn't now. I mean, kids will have to take out their loans if they want to live in their dorms, right, or live on anywhere, living expenses, food. Partying, which by the way, I don't even think you could take out a loan to party because when I took out student loans, they paid all the bills for me. I didn't get the money in my bank account. It wasn't like they deposited it in my bank account and then I was allowed to go spend it on they controlled where it went. So you still have to pay for your living expenses. That's something you'd have to work for. That's something you'd have to take out loans for.
You and I are never going to agree on this because I want to abolish the Department of Education. So
But then where are you
we're
gonna-
going
what is that
way
gonna-
back.
So the thing is, though,
I
is that-
want the whole system reformed. I'm pro school choice. I'm pro voucher. I'm pro own your own decisions. I'm pro weed out the bad schools by creating competition in the marketplace. From economically, I'm super conservative. So you're economically, we could have a
Right.
blast on this. Unfortunately, we don't have time to do that. I do want to get to the super chats just to see if we have any, but I have loved this. I knew I was going to love this discussion with you.
This has been
I think,
fun.
I think the message to everyone, though, really on this discussion, too, is do you see how this is very doable? Right. We don't agree on everything. We see the world similarly sometimes, differently sometimes. Neither of us have called for the other person to be canceled.
Oh,
This is a
whatever. You just
free
wait. I'm
exchange
going to get
of-
on Twitter right after this.
Right after this, she's going to be like, cancel Jed. She said X, Y, and Z about school, Department of Education. That was my that was my line. That was my red line. No. So it's very doable, people at home. It can happen. It may not be able to happen in cable news and network TV right now, but it can happen in some spaces. Tyler, it's been a long time, Tyler.
I'm sure we got some good ones on this.
Tyler
one.
probably has to pee. Sorry, Tyler. Did I embarrass you?
I'm
well, I do.
groovy.
So let's move along.
I had to stretch though. All right, so we got a few. Brad says, solution to the abortion question: make it legal to abort a child right up to the day they declare their majority. Steve said, even after all the shenanigans, you know what I'm talking about, Miss J. Bila. Chicago still has your back. $50 donation. He said, use this donation to buy Adam a Trump T-shirt.
Who is that?
Steve.
Steve. Okay.
Steve wants you to use the $50 to buy Adam a Trump T-shirt.
Okay, I will use that $50. I'm trying to think how ostentatious we can make that T-shirt, but I'll find one.
That sounds like an expensive T-shirt.
Then we can make Adam wear it on next time he appears on the show.
We're gonna make him one in-house, and it's gonna pop.
Okay, and
It's
then
gonna pop.
I can have him back on here, and
Right.
he'll be wearing that.
Right.
Okay, I'm down. Thank you, Steve.
I got a few more. So for Miss Kim, Rising tried to screw their previous host when they were leaving for their new show. So does their treatment of you surprise you?
It's a different company, but yeah, I mean they were bought, but yeah, I mean it's yeah, I mean, I don't know. Surprise or no surprise, I don't know.
Would you appear on The View if you were invited? Jed, they owe you an apology.
Yeah,
Would
they
who
do.
appear on The View?
Would Kim appear on The
Oh,
View?
would you?
And The View owes Jed an apology.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk to anybody. That would be excruciating conversation. It wouldn't be like this one, would it?
No.
It'd be
You'd
long
be
and
there for
drawn
like
out.
4 minutes, and the last 30 seconds of it would be them yelling
Screaming
at
at
you
me.
and shutting your mic.
Yes.
Kim, do you feel the left has gone too far with gender pronouns and kids as young as 3 transitioning?
For one, kids as young as 3 cannot transition. They don't. So you only start transition, like actual transitioning. Well, it depends. I guess mentally they could say, yeah, this is a little girl now or something. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that whole movement has gone too far. And I definitely am not for all of these different pronouns. I was looking at Time the other day on their tweet, and they were like, I and air. It's like one thing for it to be he,
Oh, the
she,
magazine,
they, them.
right.
Oh, it's like
but then it was
15,
like
20.
air and I, and I was like, what the hell is this? I don't
Yeah.
even understand it. Yeah, I'm not. I think that's gone nuts.
Facebook has 76.
It's
Is
just
it?
nuts.
Yeah.
It's gone nuts.
And even the college applications now, like that you see, it has like, it's just like this. It's like scrolling
I'm just
all the way
sticking
down.
with she and he, and if that upsets people, I don't know what to tell you. Just pick one.
Yeah.
Last question. I guess this is addressed to anybody. Why are men in Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia not struggling with their gender? I guess nobody is interested in becoming a woman there.
I think it's also a different society. I don't think you can come out with your gender there without maybe
A little bit of a different culture.
Yeah, there might
Just
be a bit of a
touch.
consequence in Saudi Arabia, and in Afghanistan they've got bigger problems than that to worry about.
Yeah. Also, if people saw What Is a Woman, you saw that Matt Walsh, where did he go to, like a village in Africa or something? And he goes and he starts talking to these people, and they're like, is this a joke? Like, we're so first world problems
Yeah,
here
it's
that
so
we worry
first
about
world.
everything that like
We have
some
nothing
people-
else to worry
Some people
about.
are just trying to eat, they're
Right.
trying to eat and like have a roof over their head, and that's where the day ends. And we're so privileged in so many ways here, we don't even realize it sometimes.
And that really is an indication of how privileged we are.
Right.
Is the fact that these are the things we can worry about. It's like pronouns.
That's exactly right.
One more just came in. Kim, miss you on Rising. Your voice is one we didn't know we needed. Keep speaking the truth. It is less of a burden than bending to the mob.
There you go. So you
Thank
got those fans out there. They came in, watched the
Yeah.
show. I'm glad. Welcome,
Yeah, I
everyone.
know, right?
Yeah, we did pretty well today. We had
Awesome.
peaked out right at 8:25 on live.
That's
Oh,
good.
wow.
That's
So-
good. We're
Yeah.
we're brand new.
No,
our
I know.
channel,
This is
which
really
is
cool.
awesome. Kim, I loved having you here. I could talk to you all day. Maybe next time we'll get into public school and how that needs to be trained. I'm sure that could go on
I'll have
all
you on
day.
my show to talk. Again, we
That
can
would
talk
be
about stuff too. I'm sure.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. And
Thank you.
our show is like doesn't have an end time. Sometimes it's like 1 hour. Sometimes it's like 3.
It's
So
better
you
that
never
way,
know.
I think, for this type of thing.
Yeah,
'Cause
you
can
got to
really
talk
just
it
get
out.
into
You got to
yeah.
talk it out. I loved having you. I loved agreeing with you. I loved disagreeing with you. Audience, thank you so much for sharing this time with us. I hope you leave and are thinking more about all these issues. That's the goal. I will be back here on Monday. It'll just be me. We have 2 phenomenal guests next week. I don't want to announce them yet because they're not confirmed, but you're going to love them. I have a guest on Wednesday that's going to rock your world, and I have one on Friday. Actually, Friday is confirmed. Next Friday, we have Jesse Kelly. Jesse Kelly is very outspoken on politics, very, very conservative. He has some interesting takes. He's been clashing with Glenn Beck on. We're going to talk to him about that and where he sees the state of the United States of America. But we also have a phenomenal guest on Wednesday. You're not going to win. But Monday, you're stuck with me. Sorry ahead of time. We'll do some cool stuff. Tyler will be here. So Tyler, you better get some sleep over the weekend because, with the vaults.
I'm going home and crashing until
Awesome.
tomorrow about 12
There
tomorrow.
you go. They're doing the vault over at Valuetainment's got this whole thing going on. Anyway, have a fantastic, I keep thinking it's Monday, but have a fantastic weekend. I'll talk to you more on Monday about what happened in New York. It's a shit show over there. Go have some pizza. Enjoy yourselves. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on Monday. Bye-bye.